she goes, when did you move back? And so anyway, a good childhood. The things that were tough was the education part. And I don't mean this to sound, these are the thoughts of a child, right? So I'm not trying to insult anybody, but by the time I hit the 9th or 10th grade, I was like, I'm going to end up on the back of a garbage truck. I can't consume this information the way they want me to. And then I got some help, like around the 9th or 10th grade, and I was re-diagnosed, and which didn't mean anything other than, they just confirmed it. And then when I was, I didn't realize it at the time, but my compass was kind of set. When I lived in Virginia, across the street in Newport News, Virginia, was the Keck family. And I played with Chris Keck. Well, Chris Keck's father was a major in the Air Force. And and he was in charge of the security police squadron. He was the operations officer at the security police squadron at Langley Air Force Base. And I used to watch him every morning come out in that uniform, baby, and that was it for me. That's what I'm going to do, So, and then,
and that was when you were a little kid. You already knew.
Yeah. My dad had been in the Air Force. My dad, he was born in 1928, so he was a teenager during the Second World War. But the Korean War, he went in the Air Force reserves. He was already in the Air Force reserves. The Korean War kicked off. Then he went to regular Air Force. He was an aircraft mechanic. And he ended up being a flight engineer on a B-17. They used B-17s from Japan to fight the Korean War. And so, my dad was very disciplined from the Air Force. Not before that, but from the Air Force. So my course was kind of set in a few different ways.
Right.
And then a lot of the adults that I befriended when we lived in Newport News, like I was just a kid, but we had these cool adults. And they were all in the military. One was an Air Force F-15 pilot who rode a motorcycle and used to ride me around on his motorcycle. The other one was an Air Force captain who flew the Air Force version of the Lear jets and to fly the brass around. And he had been a C-130 pilot, I believe, in the Vietnam War. But anyway, his name was Panky. His last name was Panky.
Panky or Pinky?
Panky.
P-A-N. Okay.
Yeah. And his wife's name was Patsy.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, Captain Panky had an old Willys Jeep. So I used to go four-wheeling with him. And so, I had these great sort of adult friends. And I figured out really fast, I might have this learning disability. But one of the things I learned really young from my father and from some of these other people were be on time, don't stand around if something needs to be done, the simple things that, and my dad was really good about that. Not that my dad never turned to me and said, you should do this. I just did what he did. And then I did what I emulated what some of these other people did. And one of the things, it was the hardest for me to learn is to keep my pie hole shut, because I was young but that got fixed when I went in the Air Force. So,
I can imagine. Yes. I can imagine that.
Yeah. So no regrets about my childhood. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, my parents could have done a better job. I was lucky.
That's amazing. I think and that's a great story to overcome to get where you want to go and learn how to deal with ADD and dyslexia. I think that's amazing and very encouraging for those with similar issues that they are going through.
Yeah. And I try to make that point when I meet people with the issues but when you say overcome and that's the proper word, but I always describe it to people as just learn to go around it.
Yeah.
It's in your way.
Adapt, right?
Right. Find other things. Listen, I got all the way into the Secret Service uniform division before anybody found out. And then when they found out, I'll tell you about this later, but the right person found out and they protected me, and
Awesome.
set me up in a way where it was never an issue. So
Right.
anyway.
So you get to basic training boot camp. What was it called for you?
It was Air Force basic training.
Basic training.
Yeah, it was 1982.
Okay.
Um,
And what was that like? Was it a culture shock for you?
yes.
It was, even
Yes.
though your dad had been in the Air Force and you had a neighbor who.
Oh, yeah. Everybody,
wow.
I mean, seriously, like 60, 70% of the people I knew, especially the adults that I knew, had been prior military. Family members, everybody. And, I just.
And they didn't pre-warn you?
Yeah, they did, but I was a kid, and
well, yeah, I know that. Yeah, I get that.
one of the things that, and I will tell you flat out that, and I'm not blaming this on anything. Like, I'm not saying it's because I had ADD or dyslexia. I was naive. I was a very naive kid, and I was a young naive adult for a while too. And then, but so when I went in the Air Force, like, I kind of surprised my parents. My mom was they were kind of putting pressure on me. What am I going to do? I graduated high school, blah, blah, blah.
We tend to do that.
Yeah. No, all right. No, yeah. So, one day to kind of get my mom to, close up a little bit, I just went down to the local recruiter in Ridley Park, and talked to the guy. I went to the Marine Corps first. And then
how'd that go?
Oh, it went fine. And they probably would have took me, but I really went just so I could come home with the brochure and scare the crap out of my mother. And then I knew, like, if I was going to actually go in, I was going to go in the Air Force.
Yeah.
I did. In hindsight, I wish I had gone into the Army and tried I just wish I had tried to go like into the airborne or something and take that route. And I'll explain that to you in a minute. So, anyway, so I came home with these brochures and I just threw them on the kitchen table. And the next day, my dad, he's at work and he calls the house. He's like, "Hey, where does brochures come from?" I said, "Well, I picked them up the other day." He goes, "Don't do that to your mother." he goes, "We can, you can go in the military. You're 18 years old." He said, "But don't torture your mother." So I said, "All right," and so anyway, I went to see the Air Force recruiter again. And so I decided I wanted to be a security policeman, and it was fine.
And what led you to that decision?
The guy that used to live across the street.
Okay. So specifically, that's what he did?
Well, he was a security policeman. And the other thing was, too, that I sort of fell in love with law enforcement when I was a kid. And it started out as it would for a kid, right?
Right.
So I'm like 10 years old, and I'm at McDonald's. And my mother and I are standing ordering food, my mom and I. And we're at the cashier that's right next to the drive-in window. And I look out the window, and a Newport News police car pulls up. And the girl just hands them the food, and there's no money exchange. And my mom goes, "Oh, they don't pay for food." She goes, "No, we comp them when they're in there working." I'm like, "Free food from McDonald's? Oh, I'm in." So,
kids and adults alike, that is such a way to get them to do what you want them to do.
It was so funny, and the funny thing is I was with a friend of mine, and we were the same age. And at that age, I'll never forget this. I turned to him and I go, "I think I want to be a police officer." And he looked at me and goes, "I'm going to be a dentist." And he is. So.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah.
So that's actually a great story, because, and that you carried it with you for 8 years, 9 years, something like that, before you go when you talk to the recruiter. And so you tell the recruiter that's what you want to do.
Right. He says I got to wait a year for a slot. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I hadn't signed on the dotted line yet because my dad had, talked to me and I said, okay, I said, listen, I'm just telling you right now, I'm not signing anything. My father will not be happy about that. I said, and he's like, well, I can come to your house and talk to your parents. I'm like, okay, but not now, but okay, I'm fine with that. But I've got to pave the way for this a little bit, So anyway, and keeping in mind that, I'm 18, almost 19 years old then, right? 19, I think. And, from the time I was 12 or 13 years old, by the time I was 15 years old, I was over 6 feet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How tall are you now?
I'm 6'2", but I had a size 12 shoe at like 13. I grew so fast one summer, like I was passing out from low blood pressure. It was crazy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm a big human being, and a pretty good sized human being. And so anyway, so basically I told this guy I have to get my mom's permission, but anyway, so I went home and 3 days later, the guy called me. He goes, hey, Gary, good news, bad news. And he said, if you want, you can go in a week. And I said, a week? He said, yes. He said, a young man out in California that we were bringing in a week had a car accident and he broke his leg.
Oh, no.
And we're not getting rid of him, but we have to, give him time to heal. And you can take that spot. So I said, I'm on my way down. And I did. I went down there and I joined and I came home.
Before the conversation?
What's that?
Before the conversation with your parents?
Oh, well, we had talked a little bit, but I had not. Well, the last time we talked, probably the day before, it was, yeah, don't worry. I'm not really sure I'm going to do it yet. Oh. So he convinced me. I felt like, and I'll be honest with you, like I wanted to get on. I wanted to go forward. I always I have to go forward. It's one of the things I developed young as a kid. I might have some issues, whatever. Just keep moving forward. Fall forward. Get up. Fall forward. And so I felt like, and I wanted to see how bad things were with me. Right? I wanted to see if I could pass this test, if I could get in there. So I did, and actually, in the basic training was fine. This is what I did learn. The way the Air Force, the military teaches people, and this is not an indictment on anybody's IQ or anything, but I would tell you, for me, you talk about the light bulb coming on, when you're sitting in a class and they show you they tell you what they want you to do. They show you how to do it. And then they help you do it. I mean, I'm telling you, it was incredible. And then especially and I had a very, very in-depth mechanical background because of my father.
Okay.
I mean, electronics, car part. I was fixing cars at a very young age because my father was getting older and, he'd rather me get dirty underneath the car than him. So,
well, plus you had to learn how to keep that truck running.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. My dad fixed everything. My father rarely took a vehicle to get repaired unless it was new. Like we had one car, a new car when we were younger, a station wagon, and my dad fixed everything. Woodwork, house stuff, whatever. He was like the local neighborhood repair guy. Anyway,
wow.
Yeah. So when I got into the Air Force, and I had been exposed a little bit to firearms, not too much. BB gun. My dad didn't hunt, but my just about everybody else in Newport News, Virginia did. And I learned to hunt a little bit with some of my friends, parents, father, and so I was fascinated with firearms, and like a lot of kids are, especially boys, and so I just soaked it in, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. I mean, the first time I saw the working mechanisms of an M16, I just understood how it worked.
Yeah.
And and so anyway, that went very good. It went basic training was fine. No real problems with the tests or anything. Everything went fine. I'm pretty sure some of the stuff was by the skin of my teeth, but I was fine. You learn the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and the physical fitness stuff was great. I loved it. Loved everything about it.
So, do you have any funny stories from boot camp? For basic training.
Yeah, every day, just about. But yeah, so I talked about my inability to keep my tongue from moving. So I still do this today as an adult. I'm not great with confrontation, and when I say that, it means like I don't shy away from it. I just don't handle it the way the other person would like it to be handled. And so
that's fair.
Yeah. So, but one of the things I do is I have a nervous laugh, and the Air Force, the military does not like that. So the first time I was face to face with a DI, a TI, technical instructor in the Air Force, I smirked and laughed. And so I had to stand over a toilet for like an hour and flush my laughs down the toilet. So,
flush the laughs down the
ha,
toilet.
Ha, 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 flush. Ha, ha. And it happened a couple times, different times, but also too, like after a while, I didn't realize it till years later when I was thinking about basic training. They were baiting me. One day we're standing in formation. Every day, there's a formation, in basic training. That's what they're teaching you to do, is to behave in a certain way. In every branch, right? We all behave pretty much a certain way. Some things are a little different culturally, but anyway, so every morning you stood in a line after your locker got inspected, or I think we had lockers, vertical lockers, and then your bed was inspected, and then they would ask you questions on the stuff you were supposed to learn the day before about government, about the UCMJ, about the Air Force in general, and some of it was history. And so anyway, 3 people down from me, they asked this guy who the president of the United States is. And he correctly, they asked him who the president of the United States is. And he correctly states Ronald Reagan. And then they go to the next guy and they say, who is in charge of all armed forces? And the guy says, the president of the United States, Ronald Reagan. And they get to the guy right next to me and they ask him, who's in charge of all the women in the military? And he says, Nancy Reagan. And I burst out laughing. I literally spit. Because I knew this guy standing next to me, he was a good guy, but he was a little goofier than I was, And I'm telling you, I paid. Oh, God, did I pay? They flipped my bed over. They flipped my locker over. After I put all that stuff back together, I did some push-ups. We had to go and march. We all paid for my laughing because numbnuts next to me thought Nancy Reagan was charging all the women in the. So that was one of my favorite. I have.
How did they respond to that answer? That's my question.
I'll tell you what. There were 3 TIs, right?
Mm-hmm. One
of them was this enormous. When I say enormous, I'm a big dude. This guy was 4 inches taller than me.
Oh wow!
And he was a black man, and he was terrifying looking. He scared the crap out of me because his voice rumbled. He couldn't whisper. Like he didn't yell, but he naturally, I don't know naturally, but his voice when it came out, like you could just feel your sphincter close up. It was like he was terrifying. And then it turns out when I left the basic training and went on to my tech school, which was in Texas, I ran into him in the BX. And he was the nicest man. He was so sweet and he was so funny. And, anyway, so the other 2 turned around and I didn't realize it at the time. They turned around because they couldn't keep their composure.
Because they're starting to laugh.
This dude could keep his composure. And so anyway, so that's pretty much, that's one story. I have another one if you want.
Sure. I'm all about great stories.
Yeah. So when we lived in Newport News, I told you that I was surrounded by military, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we kept in contact with the McCluskey family, Lieutenant Colonel McCluskey and his wife They lived right next door to us. They had 2 twin boys, Jimmer and Jeff, and they had a
Jimmer?
younger daughter named Jimmer, Jeff, and I can't think of her name right now. It'll come to me. Anyway, I used to babysit Jimmer and Jeff. And,
Are you saying Jimmer?
Yeah, Jimmer.
Okay. I was like, am I hearing that wrong?
Yeah, one Jimmer and one Jeff. Yeah.
There were some interesting names there.
Oh, yeah. So we kept in contact. So when I went in the Air Force, my mother wrote them a letter because they were still at Lackland Air Force Base. They were in Texas, not at Lackland. There's another base right that connect Kelly. They were at Kelly Field.
Okay.
So anyway, one day in basic training, towards past the middle, pretty close, getting close to the end. I feel like I'm going to graduate, and I'm starting to function like a young airman's supposed to, and everybody is. And so one day on a Saturday morning, we're cleaning the barracks, and a sergeant walks in and yells my name, tells me to stop cleaning, put away my stuff, and report to the duty officers. I forget what they called it, CQ or something. Anyway, I had to go report to this little shack where the NCO in charge at that time was. So I get there, and he gives me a pass and tells me to report to the front gate. So I go jogging out to the front gate, and I didn't know I could take a shuttle. So I jog out to the front gate, and there's Lieutenant Colonel McCluskey waiting for me. And I'm going out on Saturday while everybody else cleans the barracks.
Oh, wow.
So,
nice to know people, right?
Yeah. So he came in, he signed me out. And before I left, the sergeant said, "You are in his care. If he tells you to change your clothes, you're fine. Have a good time. When you come back, you're back in the Air Force." I said, "Okay." And I did. And so he drove at the time, Lieutenant Colonel McCluskey. He had an old Volkswagen. Well, it wasn't old then. It was probably new. A Volkswagen microbus, one of those buses.
Oh, yeah. I know those. Yeah.
Yeah. So we pulled off base, and he stopped on the side of the road and threw a pair of jeans, tennis shoes, and a T-shirt at me. I changed out of my uniform, folded everything nicely, put it on the seat, and we went back to their house, saw the whole family. We had fajitas and played badminton, and had a great day. And that was my favorite day. And in basic training, in basic training, yeah.
Right.
My favorite day in training was the day we got to learn how to use the M60 machine gun and the 50 caliber machine gun. So,
wow.
Anyway,
well, you like, taking things apart and putting them back together. So
I like shooting stuff with bullets too, apparently. So.
It's so much fun, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Especially when you're not paying the bill for it, right?
Well, yeah.
That magic. Yeah. It's that magic taxpayer,
Yeah.
That was it. I stayed in for 4 years. My first base ended up being I was assigned to McCord Air Force Base, and Mount St. Helens had happened the year before.
Oh, okay.
And somebody in my security police unit had orders to Merch Head, Turkey, which was a remote site. It's a hardship site. And his wife, as young as we were, his wife was sick with cancer.
Oh, no.
So he needed somebody to switch orders. So I consulted with my friend, Lieutenant Colonel McCluskey. And he said, "Yes, here's what you can do if you want to do this. Ask to see the base chaplain.
Oh,
tell your friend, tell your teammate to see the base chaplain, tell him the story." So he did. He asked to see the base chaplain, and the next day I went in and they switched my orders, and I was going to Turkey. And I didn't tell my parents. They thought I was going to McCord Air Force Base. They didn't find out till I came home for 2 weeks before I went to Turkey. They thought I was going to Washington State.
What did they say about that?
Oh, they said, "Oh,
right. There's nothing they could do about it."
And well, so I kind of reversed my dad's psychology, right? When my dad made it very clear to me when I was talking about going to the military that the needs of the government, the needs of the service come first. That you're just a body.
Yeah.
You know, he said, you're just, it's not like it is at home. And, he said, don't get me wrong. They're not going to be incredibly reckless with your life, but they will be, and you're just a body. And so when I came home and I told him I had different orders and I was going to Merced, Turkey, and my dad started to say something, I go, well, needs of the service, Dad.
I'm sure he loved having his words thrown back at him.
Yeah, he took it very well. He was,
right.
My dad's a good guy. And so, so my ancestry, I'm half Irish. My dad's Irish. My mother's Lebanese.
Okay.
So going to Turkey was sort of like getting close to the Middle East. I was kind of excited about it. I liked it. I was there for a year. It was a remote site. And because you're a young airman, the remote base was about 50 miles or so north of Ankara, Turkey, along the border of the Black Sea, the Turkish border of the Black Sea. So I had a barracks in two places. I had one at Ankara and then one up at the main base. And they were, it was a very small unit of people. And they told me from the very beginning, everybody from the lieutenant colonel in charge of the outfit to the juniorest NCO, Gary, this is not the real Air Force. We treat you like a family because there's so few of us. We all ate together. We had a lot of separate rooms and everything, but we ate together, we played together, we worked together. I never called any of the officers by their first names, but we had nicknames for them, or we were very familiar and friendly, and not like it was abnormal, so anyway, it was sort of I knew what I was getting into when I left there. I was going to Langley Air Force Base. It was a headquarters base. So, but I love Turkey. It was great. I had some great experiences.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So G23, and thank you for showing up tonight and for joining in on the conversation. So he said he was born about 6 months after Mount St. Helens erupted, and he was born in Washington, and wanted to know your thoughts on Joint Base Lewis McChord.
So I actually had been there once, but I wasn't in the Air Force. When I was in the Secret Service Uniform Division, which we'll get to eventually, we landed there one time. We were there probably for a day and a half. I love that area. That's what I thought about. I thought it was great. Now, when I got there, they were still cleaning up.
Yeah.
It had been a long time, but there were still, Mount St. Helens, it was just unbelievable how the damage that was done.
Absolutely. Because what year did that erupt?
I want to say 80.
Yeah. And I want to think.
I think it was fall. It was either summer or late summer or fall, because there were still a lot of people recreating in the area.
Yes, because I think we had gone through, it might have been 75, 76, 1975, 1976. Right. Absolutely beautiful. I think we also had gone, I think that was the same time we had gone up to Three Sisters and just looking at all of the volcano rock.
Yeah.
So I remember that, and it was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And on a sort of a different note, I'm stunned. I know it's been a little while, but I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when they started, or maybe even 20 years ago, when they started looking how fast it was recovering. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Mother Nature, man, you can't mess with her.
She's going to do what she wants when she wants. It's all in her own time.
She can reconstruct too, can't she?
Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah. Take a look at Helene.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then let's see who else has commented. So Jim wanted to say thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And I will probably get to this if you were, but Christine, thank you for being here tonight. And she wanted to know if you might have been at Anderson in Guam.
No, but I've never been to Guam, but I tried to get promoted there. When I was later on after this Air Force, the Secret Service, and then I was an air marshal. There was a job in Guam as an air marshal in charge of the security, the federal government side of security at at the base in Guam, the civilian airport, which I think is actually shared with the military. But anyway, I tried to go there. I tried to move there. I tried to move my family there. I tried to get promoted, but actually the job went to somebody else, and life went on. So, but I've never been there, but I tried to go there.
Yeah. It sounds like I think, are they reopening for the Marine Corps, the base there in Guam?
Yeah. So pretty much from the federal government's perspective, one end of that island is an Air Force base, the other end's a naval base, and then the people live in between. And they are expanding greatly to cover some of the ground they lost in the Philippines, that kind of thing. And
I think they're losing a lot in, or at least the Marine base in Japan.
Yes. Yeah. So there's some issues there, but they've been doing this Guam refit or expansion for a long time. And if I'm remembering correctly, like there hasn't been much of a slowdown. So.
Right. And I had, I know one of my brothers had been stationed in Guam, and my niece, I believe, had been born there. Mm-hmm. So while he was there. So great place from what I hear. Never been, but it looks like a really nice place.
Yes.
Okay. So where did we leave off? So we get to then, I think we talked about, because we kind of jumped ahead a little bit. So you end up getting brought out of your basic training by the lieutenant colonel.
Yes.
And go home and get to have fajitas and enjoy time with friends and family, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And how was it when you had to go back? Did they give you grief for it?
No.
Not at all.
No. Yeah. So, and that was when I realized this is going to be good for me. Those people didn't care that, they were thrilled that one guy got to go off the base, and they probably knew. I mean, the guy that signed me out, if I remember correctly, I think he knew who Lieutenant Commander McCluskey was, and he's an officer, and it's not what he's asking to do is allowed, and so anyway.
And was McCluskey, was he still in the military at that time?
Yeah, he was, and he was about to retire too, and so he was about to retire. So they had they had kind of a funny story. I'll tell you real quick. Mm-hmm. When we were their neighbor in Newport News. When they left Newport News, they weren't going to Texas. They were going to Iran.
What?
Iran had not fallen yet.
Wow.
They were going to Iran. They were there for 24 days. And then the secretion hit the oscillator. And
that's one way to put it, isn't it?
Yeah. And then they left both their vehicles behind. They basically got out. No kidding. He wasn't even in Iran as it was happening. He was TDY somewhere. He called his wife and said, get 4 paper bags, put enough, put what you can for each one of you in one paper bag, and get over to the front gate at the base. Get inside the gate. Get inside the gate. Get inside the gate now. And she grabbed the kids and didn't even do that. She grabbed the kids, threw them in the car, drove to the base, left the car outside, and ran through the gate with the kids. And then went to the BX and bought the stuff they were going to need. And they were on the base for a couple of days before they got to fly out. So it was bad.
Yeah. Well, we all know how that's
right. So that was their unfortunate story. But so then I go back to basic training, and we finish up. I graduate. I get to go home for 2 weeks, and then
off to Turkey.
Yeah, for a year. It was a remote base. I loved it. It was fun. I saw some great things. I was treated like great. I always, when I say that to some people who know me, they're like, well, that's because you're you. And I'm like, no, that's not always it. Don't get me wrong. Not everybody in my life has been, a wonderful person. There's but the positivity
begets positivity, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, and then I get, because I was at a remote site, And because I had chose those orders, I didn't realize this. I switched the orders because my coworker at the time, a guy I trained with, his wife was sick, right? So they switched our orders. Because I did that and I volunteered to go to a remote site, like you get a bunch of points, and like I could have gone anywhere in the world.
Oh, wow.
I could have gone to Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. As a matter of fact, a lot of the people that went to this base were going so they could go back to Hickam.
Oh.
But I wanted to go to Newport News, Virginia, because that's where I grew up. So, and I did. I worked at the same Langley Air Force Base that I lived near when I was a kid, and it was great. And my friends were still there, and they were in college, and it was very good. And then trying to think of what was significant when I was in the Air Force. So when people talk about my service, I refer to myself, I was a Cold War warrior, which is the truth. And
Right.
that's not taking anything away from anybody. That's what was going on there, right? That was the big deal. We hate the Russians hate us. You know, kill a commie for your mommy. You know, that was the way it was then. And then not until, you know, the early 90s did, you know, like the first Gulf War, and then it eventually morphed into the war on terror.
A mess.
Yeah, complete. Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean,
no.
Yeah, you've got the Operation Enduring Freedom, and you've got, you know, just.
And so after 1991, I'm jumping ahead, but I'll go
That's
back.
okay.
After 1991, I'm working at the White House, so I can tell you all kinds of shit that was going on.
Oh, I'm all ears for that.
Yeah, but going back to the Air Force, so I'm trying to think. So Reagan's president, and you know he's pretty tough dude, man. Very polite, nice guy, but man,
don't cross him.
He's got to focus, right?
Yes.
And so the country of Libya, which is sort of ironic because then later on we bombed the crap out of them, but the country of Libya was going to invade. Libya was lining up on the border of Chad. It was supposed to be an exercise at first, and then it became clear to the intelligence people that they looked like they were going to invade Chad. So at the time in the Air Force, there was this thing called, in the military, there was a thing called the Rapid Deployment Force. We even had a cool patch, you know, because you always have to have a patch in the military. Right. You make up something new, you get a patch.
Yep.
So we had this Rapid Deployment patch, and it was the Air Force, a couple Air Force wings, Air Force Security Police to secure it, and then I forget how many cargo planes to basically move everything. Basically, they could move an air wing or two. I believe the 82nd Airborne. When I say I believe, it was either the 82nd or the 101st. Whatever I was assigned. I forget, you know, what them. A very aggressive, small, very motivated group of Marines. and
aren't they always?
Yes. And well, I tell you, I learned a lot from them. I did. But anyway, so you know, that's what we deployed to the country of Chad when they thought Libya was going to invade Chad.
Right.
And so we were only there 3 or 4 weeks, and then we came back, and then I had a really good deployment after that. You know, one of the things my father told me about the military was never volunteer for anything. Well, I sort of didn't do that.
You already broke that rule.
Yeah, well, that's true. I did. But I actually sort of jumped into it with 2 feet. So there were 2 or 3 different times that I volunteered for stuff, and it ended up being like great. The first one was this exercise in Egypt called Elf Worm, and they might even still do it today, but it's an exercise between the American military, mostly the Air Force, and then the Egyptian Air Force.
Oh, wow.
And so this is like 1983, late 82, 83. And we go there for a couple of weeks, and we do this training exercise. But the base that we're at in Egypt, we're staying downtown in a very nice hotel right at the base of the pyramids. And then we would drive in a bus every day out to where the exercise was at the base. And so this is my it's my second exposure to a Muslim country. You know, Turkey had a lot of Muslims, and Egypt did, and so it's sort of familiar to me, but it's different in a way that this base that we went to, it had only been 1980. It had only been 10 years since they fought their last war with Israel. The planes were still laying. Like all the wreckage, they just bulldozed it into the middle of the road, in between the roads and runways. Like there was more shot up crap. It was like walking through a history book. And we were there for 10 days, and I remember the first thing I remember, when we were like an hour before we were getting ready to land. They were prepping and everything, and they came over the PA system and spoke to all of us. So we're on a C-141, one of those big old long cargo planes, and we were just personnel, our equipment, and like supplies for us, nothing else, right?
Okay.
But the plane was full, right? It had a lot of stuff on, no vehicles is what I'm trying to say. And so it seemed like we were loitering, like and then they finally come over and tell us they're having trouble landing because there's a sandstorm. But if we don't land soon, the runway is going to disappear. So we get on the ground, and I find out later on, because, again, it's an exercise. You're there for 10 days. You are securing the aircraft you came in on, so you can leave on it. So you become really good friends with the crews and the pilots and the mechanics. And, so anyway, the pilot confided in me that the thing about this runway was that you picture a runway in your mind, right? It's in the desert and it's straight and flat, right? Well, the truth is the desert moves. Like the ends of the runway are actually higher than the center. So it's hard to land on if you get too far down the so anyway, that was his biggest nightmare. But what he told me was it wasn't his nightmare, because he brought us in.
Right.
He wasn't going to have to fly but a couple missions. But the F-15s that were coming in were going to fly as much as they could every day.
Wow.
And so they brought a plane in, another C-141 that had nothing but tires on it for F-15s. Nothing but tires. Rear tires, front tires. And not just the tires, like the whole assembly. They were already ready to go,
Which was really smart to be that prepared.
Yeah, I learned a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just just visualizing it in my head that they're kind of like this.
Yeah.
So the back of the runway or the front of the runway kind of has this, and then flattens out and then goes back up on the other side. That is, I can't imagine being.
And also in places like that, and we have the same issue in Turkey. There's packs of wild animals, and wild animals do not mix with fast-moving airplanes rolling on the ground. A pig, a dog can collapse the landing gear on those, a big animal. And so anyway, so that was an issue. We actually had to go and hunt the dogs down, and the Egyptians couldn't understand why, because they would just, hit them and wreck their planes and push them off to the side. But anyway, so I really enjoyed that. I did get sick while I was there because I followed all the directions, living at the hotel, don't drink the water. But I ordered a burger one time, and the lettuce had been washed in the water. So that was a tough 4 days. So, and I still had to work.
Out of the 10.
Yeah. 4 out of 10. I still had to work too, sick as I was.
Yep.
There was nobody to replace me, and I get it. But we got back to Langley, and then life went on, and we I got out of the Air Force.
And let me ask, because I didn't ask this question, and I don't know if it was clear for the viewers, but your MOS was what?
Security police.
Okay, so you did manage to go. That was when you first signed up. You signed that contract for that position.
Right. So So in the early 80s, it's a little different now. In the early 80s, they had two branches of security. They had security specialists, and then they had LE or law enforcement. The law enforcement people were like regular cops. They controlled they policed the bases,
Right.
and they shared the duty of controlling the gates with the security police. And then a few years after I got out, they changed it, and then it's just all one. Everybody learns one job. It's all pushed together, and it's just called the security forces. And they actually, it's even when I got out in '86.
Okay.
And in '84, some general in the Air Force and some general in the Army who golfed together decided that I think either Fort Bragg or Fort Benning, where they train airborne troops, was having a lull of training. There was not a lot of people coming in. So they decided that Air Force security police could learn to be airborne.
Wow.
And then if you passed the airborne school, you could apply to get a Ranger's tab. You could go through Ranger training.
Yeah.
But before you could do that, the Air Force said you had to pass their pre-course. So I was like, yeah, that sounds great, but I really wasn't prepared for it. But I tried it, and I made it to the second week, and then we were running up a hill carrying a fire hose full of sand, and my knee gave out, and that was it.
Oh.
And so I had 9 months, less than a year left. I was at Langley. Life was good. I was working the entry control gates. There was a section at Langley called the elite gate section. They were the gate guards, police officers, and it was a good job. I loved it. The reason guys love that job is because you meet every woman in the world that comes through that base. And I was young and I was single.
You're honest.
Yeah. And I would tell you, careful what you wish for. So, it was great. I love that job. I had the greatest experiences. I was involved with some really cool police stuff. I got to do some stuff that just little things. I ended up befriending, well, I guess he befriended me. So one night I was working the gate to Langley Air Force Base, the West Avenue, I think it was called. And it's a entry gate that actually goes over a body of water. There's a bridge. There's the gate. There's a bridge, probably a half a mile long, maybe longer. And then it gets to the base.
Okay.
And, I was working the gate, and this young woman comes in. And so, military cars, the rank of the person's on the front bumper. If it's an officer, you salute the car. It doesn't matter if it's his kid or whatever. And so anyway, here comes a car, and there's stars on it. And so, I snap my heels together and give a sharp salute, and the vehicle stops, and it's this beautiful young girl. She's like, "Hi, Officer Byrne. How are you?" And I said, "Good, ma'am. How are you?" And I'm trying to figure out who she is. And then all of a sudden I realized, it clicks in my head. There was 4 stars, and I'm like, "Oh, this is General O'Malley's daughter." One of his, I forget how many kids the O'Malleys had, but they had a lot of kids. So anyway, and then she drove off, and so that was that. And so I don't know, a couple of days later, here comes another car, 4 stars, but the people driving the car, it's a husband and wife, and it's the officer driving, but they're in civilian clothes, So they pull up, and I know what O'Malley, of course, what every high-ranking officer looks like.
Right.
So I snap a salute, and he stops. He rolls down the window, and his wife leans over. She goes, "I heard you met our daughter." And I was like, I'm like, "Yes, man. She seems very nice, And the general's looking at me. He's like, "Have a good evening, Airman." "Yes, sir." So they drive off. And as they're driving off, I'm looking at the car, and I see his wife lean over and push him in the shoulder, like hit him, leave him alone, That's what.
Oh my gosh.
That's the way.
So the daughter tattled on herself.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's hilarious.
I'm sure that and that wasn't there was always something funny happening like that, and I helped foil a bank robbery one time while I was there.
Oh, I want to hear this.
Yeah, middle of the day on a Friday. So Langley Air Force Base, I don't know if you've ever been there
I
in
have not.
Hampton, Virginia. Well, anybody listening that's been there will know that, Hampton, Virginia, a lot of it is, it's a lot of water, right? And the base is actually, it's sort of on a couple little islands. Like you had to cross bridges to get to the weapons storage area. And it's also a joint base. Well, it's actually a sort of a triple joint base now. It was always Langley Air Force Base, NASA Research Center, right?
Okay.
NASA and Langley. Big deal, NASA base there. And they were connected by the runways because NASA shared our runways. And and there was always something crazy happening because of the way these runways were set up. And so the bank robbery. So I'm working that same gate, the LaSalle gate, and it's Friday afternoon. It's in the summer in Hampton, Virginia. It just doesn't get any more humid and hot, right?
Yeah.
And I'm having a blast though. I love my job. I'm waving cars in. I'm all sharp, and and all of a sudden the duress alarm goes off, and the phone starts ringing, and they have a drop line. When the drop line rings, you got to I pick it up, and they said, "Hey, the bank on base, whatever bank it was, there was a couple, has just been robbed." So immediately you stop traffic, right? If you're not smart enough to realize you shouldn't rob a bank in an area where they can close all your exits, whatever. So, well, it gets even funnier later on in the story. So I, traffic's coming out. I mean, a steady line, like 20 miles an hour, steady line coming in. I'm waving traffic in. Of course, I have traffic stopped while I'm on the phone, incoming traffic. So I come out, I stop the outgoing traffic. I put up the barricades, and I go in. I get my M16 out of the rack. So you're always carrying back then we had revolvers, and you always have your sidearm. But when something like that happens, you have an M16 in this rack. You get it out. I come out with the M16, and I just give everybody hand signals and just tell them to hold on. And so somewhere on the bridge, like there's somebody who he was an officer, and I guess he was the most important major there ever was in the world. He was halfway, across the bridge, sitting in traffic. Well, after 12 minutes, and I get it, it's aggravating, but and I can't, the people that are real close to me, I'm telling them that there was a bank robbery,
right.
But not everybody knows, and there's not all this communications like there is today. So this guy finally snaps. He gets out of the car, and I see him coming down the bridge, and he's coming. He's jumping up on the medium, and he's screaming and yelling at me, and so I'm looking around, and I'm like, shit. There's a lot of witnesses here, but he keeps coming. So I'm like, okay, I got to cut this off. I don't have time to deal with this. So I start walking towards him, and I take my gun, I port arms, and I walk up. I take 3 brisk steps, and I stop, and I put my hand out, and I go, stop. And I point the rifle right at him, and he stops. And I go, return to your car immediately, Major. If you do not, I will arrest you. And I'm yelling at him in my best security police, voice. And he stops, and he didn't know what to do. And, and he's looking at me, and I go, return to your car, or I will report you to your senior officer immediately. So he turns around. He walks back to the car, and he gets about 10 cars down, and he stops, and he turns around, and I'm still pointing the rifle at him. And he's like, now he doesn't know what to do, because I think he was going to turn around and come back, but now I'm like, so he gets in his car. So I go back. Quite a long time goes by. They can't find these people. So eventually they tell us to release traffic. So we do. So at the time, they assumed that they had a boat standing by, and they abandoned the car somewhere that we hadn't found, and they jumped in a boat and, went that way.
Right.
That's what they assumed at the time. So 2 weeks later, on a Friday night, there's a noise disturbance in the barracks, in one of the NCO airmen barracks, and the security police respond. and they knock on the door and they tell it was a it was a bunch of young women having a good time, and they said, "Hey, turn down the music. Some of the people in your building work." So, which was a joke. Everybody works, right? So, as he's leaving, walking down the hallway, he goes to key his radio. And when he does, I don't know if you've ever used walkie-talkies.
Yes.
But if there's one nearby, let's say there's one in another room, when you key it, you can hear it click.
Yes.
Right? So he goes to key his radio, and he hears another radio click. He's like, well, that's weird. He turns to his partner and goes, he's a sergeant, as a matter of fact. Turns to the airman with him. He goes, is that you? He goes, no. He goes, I hear click, click. I hear another radio. So they're looking around, click, click, click. This is the military now. You don't need a warrant. So he calls to the control center and says to send the lieutenant. Somebody's got an open radio in the barracks, and they come and they discuss it, and they get the door manager, who's a senior airman, to come up with the key. They open the door. They go in there, and guess what they find? The bank bags, the money.
Was that the girls?
No.
Oh, okay. Just a whole other room.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It was actually another floor.
Okay.
There's like 3 stories, and it was walking. You walked. There were no elevators, so because we were the Air Force, we were tough, So that's how they solved the robbery. It was Air Force people, and one of them was a security policeman. The other 2 were one guy was aircraft maintenance, and the other guy was like a civil engineer or something. And that they were all pretty young, airmen or junior NCOs.
And that's why you couldn't find them initially, because they were already on base and staying there.
That's right.
And
they wore back then. The Air Force was just in the old green fatigues, right?
Right.
The security police on the flight line had the old camos, but everybody else wore the old green fatigues. And that's what they robbed the bank in, because there was thousands of people wearing them. And they just assumed that they weren't real. Like they wore the uniforms to blend in, and they were civilians, maybe with some military experience. But anyway, that's how they foiled them. So they finally caught them. And so,
wow.
Yeah. So my time in the Air Force was great. I got out in '86.
And so did they provide you any resources when you were transitioning back to civilian life?
No. Well, actually, they gave me an extra $1,300.
Okay.
By accident.
Did you have to repay it?
No.
Oh, maybe we shouldn't say that too loud.
I actually used it in my polygraph for the Secret Service.
Oh, wow. So
I'm signing out, and 2 things are going on. One, so in the Air Force, their administration was called CBPO. So I'm there, and the person I'm dealing with is a very young, my age at the time, female airman who is just the prettiest girl I've ever seen. And I'm like, testosterone's flowing, and I'm being a dork. And anyway, but as I'm talking to her, and hey, I'm getting out, and I'm looking over her shoulder because there's a TV, and I'm watching them prep the Space Shuttle Columbia.
Oh,
it's February 28th. Or is it January 28th, 1986. The day Challenger blew up. The first one.
I was going to say, because the Challenger was
first one, right? And
yes.
So, it was Challenger. So I'm watching them prep it, over her shoulder, and I'm in a hurry because I want to go back. I'm living off
1986, January 28th, 1986.
Yeah, I got out. So I'm watching them prep it on TV. I'm flirting with her, and I look down, and I've already calculated what my as I'm clearing out what they owe me, and it was supposed to be, I don't know, whatever it was. I'm sorry, it was $1,300 more. And I looked at it, I go, that's not right. She goes, what do you mean? I said, that's $1,300 higher than this, than what I was given. I had this thing that I was told what I was getting when I got out. She goes, she looked at it and she goes, I don't know where you got this from, but here's my calculation. And then she went and got some officer who came out, and the officer, who was also a female, said, Airman, do you really want us to have to go back and do all this again? What do you care? And I go, I don't want you coming after me. She goes, sign here. So I signed it. They gave me the money and I left.
And off you went.
Right. And by the time I got back to my apartment, the shuttle was gone. And
I remember that day.
I walked in the door. My apartment was full of people who were having a party. I was getting out of the Air Force, and they were crying. And most of them, a lot of them, because 40% of their fathers worked at NASA. The other ones where their parents were military.
Right.
It was unbelievably sad.
Yeah.
And I knew, so one of my childhood friends down there, her father was Jack Hall, who, if anybody wants to Google it, Jack Hall Sr. has at least 3 patents through NASA in his time at NASA. He invented the life support systems for Mercury that are still used today in space.
Oh, wow.
That turn your urine back into usable water. Yeah. And some other life support systems. Yeah. And so anyway.
Every household needs that.
Yeah. And he invented some other things. And so anyway, so after an hour, I called their house and I got Mrs. Hall on the phone and I said, can you talk? And she said, I don't know anything yet. She said, I talked to Jack. All he said was, it was those damn O-rings. I don't know what that means. He said it was the O-rings. She goes, but I don't know what that means. And I said, oh, okay. And then, time went by and then we found out it was the O-rings.
Right.
It was a seal. It was a seal between two pieces of the rocket that were too cold to expand correctly and destroyed that rocket and killed 7, 8, I forget now, but killed everybody on
7.
board. Yeah, killed everybody on board. And so anyway, that was the day I got out. And yeah, kind of messed up my party too, but that's beside the point. But and then life went on. I went home for a little while. I got a job working. I told you my dad worked for the DOD.
Mm-hmm.
He worked at the Boeing. He went back to the Boeing aircraft plant where they built the Chinooks, and they were just trying to bring online the V-22, this big tilt rotor. And I wanted to apply at Boeing because I had an aunt that worked there and could help me, but I couldn't work there while my dad worked there. Not for any other reason than my dad said so, because he felt he worked for the government. And he didn't want his son working for the company that he, had to hammer once in a while for stuff that they were doing. And so it wasn't long though that he retired, and I applied for a job there and got in, and I worked there for about 4 years. And I met just before I started working there, I met my wife at a nightclub in outside of Philadelphia, and we started dating and never stopped. And so, and then one day while I was working at Boeing, I was at Jenny's apartment on a Sunday morning, and she said to me, didn't you tell me when you got out of the Air Force, you called the Secret Service? And I said, yeah. And they said you had to have a college degree. And she said, well, do you ever hear of the Secret Service Uniform Division? I said, no, not really. And so anyway, this is back before the internet, right?
Right.
Newspaper. So there was a little piece of paper in there, fill your name out, blah, 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 clip it out, put it in an envelope, put this address on it, Washington, and mail it off. So I did. And I decided to take a job with the Secret Service Uniform Division. And my girlfriend at the time said she wasn't going unless she was Mrs. Byrne. So we
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was coming anyway.
But she sure knew what she wanted.
No, well, We've been married 35 years now. If she was sitting here, she'd be rolling on the floor laughing. So,
and so the explain if you would, or I can, because I Googled it. What exactly the Secret Service Uniform Division is.
right. So the Secret Service, it then was part of the Treasury. The agents are the people who run the Secret Service. They protect the president. Their main job is actually, their first job was currency, protecting our currency, counterfeiting.
Counterfeit, right.
Their original job was intelligence against the South, for the North, for Lincoln during the Civil War. And then they became more intelligence, and then either the day that Lincoln was assassinated or the day before, he signed the document that made the Secret Service, basically took it from being a private Pinkerton security company, and making it the Secret Service and putting them in charge of fighting counterfeit, because the South was killing the U.S. government with their counterfeiting, financially.
Right.
So, and then they didn't start doing protection full time until Theodore Roosevelt became president, because the guy that he was president for got shot. So, so the Uniform Division today used to be the original. They started out as military patrol to protect the White House, and then eventually they became the White House Police. And the way they did that is they took like 25 people from the Metropolitan Police Department, and then 25 people from the U.S. Park Police, put them together, and called them originally they were the White House Police, and they were civil servants, and they controlled access to the White House. And if you don't know anything about the history of the Secret Service or Washington, D.C. and the White House itself, it is crazy fascinating. Even in 1970, when Nixon was president, you could drive a car right past the Oval Office down West Executive Avenue.
Oh yeah, before they shut everything down.
Now you can't get within a half mile.
Yeah.
Only on foot, and you can't get any, so anyway. But
there's gates everywhere.
Right.
We tried once. My husband and I went in 2012 to DC, and we didn't get out of the rally that I was there for. So until late. And so we decided we would just walk at night and see what we could see. And
pretty cool, right?
I was really disappointed though, when the president at that time decided to shut the lights off on the flag.
Yeah, they don't know. That's not them. That's the usher's office. So
the flag, like on top of the White House, like it had been lit up, and then they just shut it down. It was seriously.
Yeah. So here's your chance to ask all the questions about the goofy things around the White House.
Yes. So I'm reading that the Uniform Division also has specialized teams, including counter sniper, emergency response, K9. What else they got?
They have a crime scene unit in Washington. They do all the metal detectors for the president and the vice president at the White House and the vice president's residence, and then everywhere they travel, no matter where it is. The Uniform Division goes. The Uniform Division has its own advance people. They work with the agent advance. And, a lot of this is becoming public knowledge now because of the attempted assassinations in Butler, Pennsylvania.
And that's plural.
Yeah. And also it became, so I'm sort of jumping ahead, but I'll go back.
That's okay.
My second book, Secrets of the Secret Service, I wrote because of this. Because I love the Secret Service. It was a great job. Don't get me wrong. I did burn a lot of bridges when I wrote the books, but so be it. My freedom of speech is no different than anybody else's.
Right.
So
let me ask, I'm going to interject real quick a question. Yeah. Unlike in the military, when there's a lot of authors, and one in particular, a friend of mine who I met, he was a guest, Kirk Spradley. He had written a book, and he had to get permission from the DOD. They had to go through, read it, mark mark out what they said he could not do. So was the same not true even though you were out of the Secret Service at the time for you?
So when I was in there were no confidentiality agreements.
Okay.
And when I decided to write the first book, Crisis of Character, we had to hire a law firm, and I was pretty sure it took. I mean, I did most of the research. By the time we hired the law firm, I was convinced that I could do it because I had retired, and I retired from the Air Marshals. And after 9/11, I transferred from the Secret Service to the Air Marshals because that's how we thought we were going to be attacked at the time.
Right.
And it wasn't. I mean, it was about patriotism, but it was considerable amount of more money to be an air marshal, and because of some of the stuff I had got involved in because of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, I had to testify, and I'll get to that.
Yes, I want to hear this story. I was told that you knew all about that.
My reputation in the Secret Service went from A1 to B10, so or worse, Actually, my friend said it went from A1 to FU. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So anyway, but I don't regret anything. So anyway, what was I talking about originally?
You're talking about the book, your
Right.
first book,
Right.
and hiring the attorneys.
Yeah. So we figure out I can do it, or I will say this: I was pretty sure I knew what I had signed when I left. All I signed was the security stuff, that I could never divulge any classified information, which is not a problem. I get it. I know, listen, I had when I worked at the White House, my clearance was higher than 5 levels above top secret because I worked outside the Oval Office. Because they have to give you that clearance. They call it code word because I think it was called TSI or top secret something SI. And it dealt with code word because your main job when you worked outside the Oval Office, like I did in the uniform division, was when the president left, if he left classified information, you were to scoop it up and put it in a little safe and then return it to his staff or return it to him when he came back or whatever. But you could not leave classified information. So anyway.
Right.
So
it's like locking your computer when you get up to go.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that tradition of that job went back, a long ways. And so anyway, all right, so security clearance, right? Yeah. So I knew what I had signed. I knew that I could tell the story without divulging any of that stuff. So we decided to write the first book. So now where was I before that? This is my ADD.
That's okay. So we were talking about, being able to write that book
Right.
without having to have
Right.
the government.
So I was in the Air Marshals, and we had moved from Homeland Security to Customs back to Homeland. Anyway, we just settled back in Homeland Security. They had no process. And I was never notified of one. So I was originally working on begging for forgiveness if it didn't work out.
Fair.
But
yeah.
By the time we got to the point where we had an agent and then a publisher, I was 100% sure. And if there was anything done wrong, it was their negligence. They let me slip through the cracks.
Right.
And the Secret Service should have never let me transfer without securing that information if they were worried about it.
Right.
All they had to do is have me say it was classified or whatever, but that's not the way it works. And so.
And what's the name of the first book?
Crisis of Character.
Crisis of Character? Okay, I'll pull that up too for the viewers. Oop, come back here. This one. I'm actually really interested to read this.
Yeah. So
let me share this here.
It was first of all, I love the job. Just like the Air Force, just like Boeing, I really liked everywhere I worked. And the funny thing is that not until I was writing this book that I realized that I mean, seriously realized that, in my case, when it came to the Air Force, the Secret Service, and the Air Marshals, it's not like I had anywhere else to go. Like, I don't have college. I had
Right.
these learning issues that they were probably not as big of an impediment as sometimes I let them be. Because you're like, well, I don't want to be humiliated in public or whatever, so. But when we decided to write this book, I felt like I was jumping into the abyss because I don't write well. But as you probably noticed, some of my friends that I know would say I'm a good storyteller.
Well, so far, I mean, the conversation, I have to agree with that.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I definitely have to agree with that.
So my friends, Dick and Nancy Schmidt, who I met at the White House years before, accidentally, against my will. And so I guess I'll have to tell you a little bit of that story too. Do we have time?
We have plenty of time.
Okay, so my mother in sometime after 1991 or around the early 90s, my mother has some kind of problem with her shoulder. She goes to this doctor, has it operated on. She's going back to the doctor, Dr. Richard Schmidt, who's an orthopedic surgeon and an oncologist. And my mother's going back for a checkup. Everything's fine. But my dad goes with her. And my dad is wearing a polo shirt that has a Secret Service star on it that I gave him. You're allowed to buy these shirts, this clothing from the Secret Service that has their emblems, their old emblems on it and stuff. So Dr. Schmidt says to my dad, "Are you in the Secret Service?" And my dad says, "No, my son is." And he goes, "Oh, we're going to Washington in 2 weeks. And we have a tour of the Pentagon and we have a tour of the Capitol, but we don't have one of the White House." My dad says, "Well, my son can give you a tour." Well, technically that was true. What my father hadn't realized is that his son had been there about 4 years. It was June, and my jet ski was still sitting in my garage, in my driveway, and my grass was a foot high because I was working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, like everybody else in the Secret Service, which is one of the reasons I eventually wrote the second book. It's a great job. We're great people. It's an important job, but it has all the problems of the IRS and the Postal Service. And the best thing that they do is they hide behind the name Secret Service of their mistakes and their incompetence. And I wrote the second book because one day I was sure they were going to get somebody killed. And they already had, in my opinion. So anyway, back to the doctor's office. So I come home from work one day and my mom, and Jane, my wife, says, "Hey, your mom called. They need you to do a tour for somebody." I'm like, "Well, I can't do it." And I'd been there for 4 or 5 years by now. I had done all my friends and family tours. And when you're in the uniform division or an agent in the Secret Service, and I'll be honest with you, most any job in the Secret Service, if you were a clerk in an office building, Secret Service headquarters, and you needed a tour and you knew me, or a UD officer worked in your office too, and you would turn to him and say, "Hey, give me a phone number, somebody I want to do a tour, on Saturday for my family." They would give you Gary Byrne's phone number or somebody like me, and I would hook you up and we would be friends, and there would be food. So,
see, always food
or alcohol. So anyway,
that's fair.
Yeah. So, well, the stuff that I was given, I never asked for anything. You see some of the crazy stuff that people, anyway, so I, this is the way the story goes. So I tell my wife, "Forget it, I can't do it." A couple of days later, phone rings to my mother. "Hey, we need you." I'm like, "Mom, I can't do it." She goes, "Your father told him you would." I'm like, "Well, Dad lied." I'm sorry. I said, "I'm working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can't do it. I'm in tours Tuesday through Saturday. And then the other 2 days I'm working around the mansion somewhere. I'm working my old post in the West Wing or whatever. And so just coincidentally, the stuff with Monica Lewinsky had already happened.
Okay.
And we thought we had gotten away with it, right? Almost 3 years goes by. We had thought I shouldn't say we thought we got away with it. We thought he got away with it.
Right.
We thought because we knew, myself and a few other people knew how exposed we were. And I don't use that term loosely, so
Right.
anyway. So, my mom's like, well, what do we tell him? I'm like, you tell him I can't do it. She goes, well, you got to call him. I'm like, I'm not calling anybody. So anyway, I hang up the phone. I come home the next day and Jane's like, your mother called again. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go cut the grass. See you. So I'm out cutting the grass and, I look up and there's Jenny on the back porch holding the phone up. It's my mother. She's, it's your mother. So I get on the phone. It's my dad. He's like, hey, I need you to do this. I'm like, I can't. He goes, what do you mean you can't? I said, when am I going to do it? I'm working 7 days a week. I can't do it. And I said, then eventually in about 3 weeks, they have to give me 1 day off. They can't work me, 56 days straight or 63 days straight or whatever it was. And he's like, well, that's, and I told him you would do it. And I said, Dad, I can't. I'm sorry. He goes, he operated on your mother. I'm like, he didn't do it for free. I'm sure there's a bill somewhere. So, anyways, try to make a long story short, which I'm terrible at. Eventually, I have to give in. I come home one day, and Jenny's like, your mother was almost in tears, because they don't want to have to tell these people, and they're so nice. I'm like, oh, I'm sure they're great, whatever. We'll give a shit. I don't care.
Right.
So, I eventually I buckle, and wait, I think I'm blending my story a little bit. So at the time that this happens, I've already left tours in the White House, and I'm an instructor. Is that right? No, I'm still working at the White House. So anyway, I'm an instructor. I'm a firearms instructor at the training center now. That's what it was.
Okay, for the Secret Service.
For the Secret Service, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So didn't realize it at the time, but I'm trying to get away from what happened with Lewinsky. I was working outside the Oval Office. This stuff was happening. I'm like, this is going to blow up, and I'm going to be right in the middle of it. And just because of the job that we did there, and so I went to tours, and then after a couple of years, I went to the security detail at the training center with the idea that I would get to be an instructor, and that's what happened. And so I'm instructing my first class when my father calls again, and I have to return the phone call. And I'm like, okay. I think it was my mother. Anyway, she gives me the person's information. I write it down on a piece of paper, and I stick it on my little sticky thing. And so the next day I get a break, a lunch break or whatever. And instead of working out again for the second time in a day, which we did in training, we loved it. You had unfettered access to guns, and you could PT every day, sometimes twice a day. Run, swim, weights. They had great training equipment, state-of-the-art stuff. So anyway, I call this phone number, and a woman answers the phone and says, Dr. Schmidt's office, can I help you? And I said, yeah, my name's Gary Byrne. I'd like to talk to Nancy Schmidt. And she goes, what would you like to talk about? I said, well, it's perfect. She goes, well, this is a doctor's office. I go, is Nancy Schmidt there? She said, yes. I said, this is Gary Byrne. May I speak with her? She said, not until you tell me what this is about. I said, okay, goodbye. And I hung up the phone. Fuck it. I tried to call. So the phone rings back. I pick up the phone. She goes, did you hang up on me? I said, is this Dr. Schmidt's office? She said, yes. I said, yes, I did. She goes, why did you hang up? I said, I'm not going to tell you any more than that's my name. And I was directed to talk to Nancy Schmidt. Going to put her on the phone. And she said, well, she's busy. I said, no problem. So am I. Click. And I hung up the phone. A couple minutes later, phone rings. I'm not at my desk. Somebody else picks it up. Hey, it's Dr. Schmidt's office. So I walk over there. I go, yep, Gary Byrne. She goes, please don't hang up on me. I go, okay. May I talk to Nancy Schmidt? She said, I need to know what it's about. I said, you don't. It's none of your business. Put her on the phone or hang up. She goes, who is it? What do you do? I said, I'm Gary Byrne from the Oh, she goes, this is about the White House tour? I go, yes, it is about the White House tour. What else do you want to know? She goes, well, hold on. So Nancy Schmidt gets on the phone, and she's the nicest lady ever. And I'm just a wound up, government.
Now you're just irritated.
Yeah. And I don't want anything to do with this.
Right.
I don't need to meet anybody else. I've done, I did tours. It's all behind me. I don't really want to go. I'm already being forced to go back to the White House and work my days off. Nothing changed, right? So she tells me when they can come. Just coincidentally, it's a Sunday where there's not regular tours, but that's fine. I can do whatever I want pretty much. When you have the Secret Service White House pass, we're the people that secure the place, sort of make the rules.
Right.
We have a lot of, you can't abuse it, but you got a lot of play, room. So I said, well, I do have that day off. I said, I want you to understand something. This is the only day I've had off in like a long time. And, I said, I don't know you. You seem like nice people. My parents think you're wonderful. I'll do this tour. But here's the deal. I'm going to give you a time and a place to be. And when I get there to the White House complex, I'm going to look through a security camera. And if you're not standing there, I'm going home. Just letting you know. I'm not trying to be a jerk. Don't judge me yet. You don't know me. I'm exhausted. And she's like, no, I understand. We appreciate this. And I was saying it like that because I was hoping she'd say, you know what, maybe this isn't a good idea, but she didn't. So
she really wanted to see it.
That's my friend Nancy, man. She don't take no for an answer. And then later on, that's why I got the book deal that I got, because her son was my co-writer. So anyway, I get to the White House Sunday morning. I stop at the Dunkin' Donuts. I get 3 dozen donuts, 2 of those little things of coffee to butter everybody up in the control center and at the places I'm going to be taking them to. And I'm standing there looking at the camera, and I told them to be there at 7:30, and at 7:15 they were standing in front of the bench. They looked like an advertisement for Abercrombie and Fitch, like. So anyway, I walk over there, and I introduced myself, and they're very excited. And it's Dick and Nancy, Annie, Richard, Max, who's the baby, but the sort of middle daughter, Annie, wasn't there. Laura. Laura wasn't there. I don't meet Laura for a couple of years, and so anyway, but so I give them a tour. We end up they're very nice people. I ended up liking them. I took them all over the place. And so anyway, so we end up being sort of lifelong friends, and
nice.
And and then his son ends up being my co-writer, and so I'm in the. Do you want me to jump forward to the book?
I do. I want to
talk about the Secret Service or something.
Well, I do have a question about the Secret Service. So first off, if anybody in the chats who's listened has any questions about that, drop those in the comments, and we'll have Gary answer those. But my question, so I want to say that Dan Bongino,
yes,
was he in with you at that time?
Yeah,
I thought he was, because he was talking. I read something. He was talking about how he was one of the Secret Service that was on Hillary Clinton's detail.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. After so Dan, I was already an instructor. No, I'm sorry. I was on the security detail, or I might have been at the White House. So Dan was on about 5 years when he came out to training. I had been there already probably 10 years.
Okay.
So I was an instructor, a firearms instructor, when Dan came on as an agent, and he was in the defense. They called it defensive measures then. And he was one of the agents that was, he had a background in jiu-jitsu and fighting. And he'd been a New York City police officer. He's a very physically fit dude.
He still is. Even after cancer and oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know after the last couple of years, he's fought a couple bouts with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know him very well. And I'll be honest with you, I sort of steered away from him because he worked with a good buddy of mine. And I had run-ins with some of the agents. There's always has been, and there always will be, a rift between the agent division and the uniform division. and it goes back almost 100 years, whatever. But the bottom line is they do manage us, and so I got along with everybody, but I didn't charge forward to everybody. But I knew Dan a little bit, and actually I ended up hanging out with him a couple times and doing some training scenarios with him, because my friend that worked with him, when they needed extra bodies, my buddy would always call me. Hey, what are you doing tomorrow in firearms? Can you come over and help us? Yeah, what do you want me to do? Put on the pads and let them beat the shit out of you. Okay, I'll do it.
I'm game.
Yeah. So yeah, and so anyway, so I was around Dan a little bit, and I will tell you that he is the real deal. He's a good guy. He's a great investigator, and he is what you see. And then I wasn't real close with him, but I will tell you that when the first book came out, he ran at me with both feet. And the second time I was on Sean Hannity, third time I was on Sean Hannity's radio show, it was with Dan Bongino. And he couldn't have been nicer. He couldn't. Sean Hannity was asking him questions about stuff about the Secret Service, and Sean doesn't understand everything about he's
right.
knowledgeable, but and Dan would say, Sean, Gary Byrne is on the phone. Ask him. He's an expert in it. This is what he did, and so anyway, he was very good, very gracious. And then later on, when I was writing the second book, I came across a story that actually involved Dan's brother, and I was going to use the story in the book. I didn't need it. I wanted to use it because it helped prove a good point about the Secret Service's. Publicly it says, oh, we're all one big happy family. We take care of our employees. That's not what reality is. The reality is if they spend as much time going after their enemies, counterfeiters and assassins, as they did their employees, we wouldn't have had what happened in Butler or a lot of the other mistakes and accidents and craps that have happened over the years. So anyway, so I contacted my agent, who knew Dan, and I said, hey, do you have an email that works still for Dan Bongino? And she said, I do, but I have to message him first before I give it to you. And I said, that's fine. 10 minutes later, I got an email back. I got a text message back with his email. So I emailed him and I said, hey, Dan, Gary Byrne, blah, blah, blah. I'm writing a second book about the Secret Service. Come across this story. It involves your brother. If you have 5 minutes, I'd like to talk to you on the phone. I don't want information from you. I want you to tell me, if I tell the story in this way, will it hurt your brother or any of the other people on his team? Because I wasn't trying to burn unknowns down. I wasn't trying to harm anybody. I wanted to tell the truth. If I ended up hammering the old director, who cares? Or even the sitting director. They're the figurehead, right? So anyway, he called me that night, and we talked for probably 45 minutes. And I told him the story. And he said, well, your story is 100% accurate, but it would be better for the Bongino family if you kept that story and didn't put it in there. I said, done. That's all you had to say. I don't need it, Dan. I don't need to even mention that part of what happened. And he said, I greatly appreciate it. And that was that. And from time to time, he messages me and stuff once in a while. I don't hear from them much anymore. Sean Hannity used to message me once in a while to verify something. And now I've heard from Hannity and a lot of other people after the attempted assassinations. And so, but anyway.
And gosh, I remember I was just graduating high school and I scored really high on the ASVAB. And of course I had all the branches sending me stuff in the mail and calling. And I really actually was looking at the Secret Service. However, when I started reading the qualifications and I was like, I'm going to have to run. I'm going to have, I'm out.
Yeah.
was like done. And that was it. So
Yeah.
go find some white collar,
Yeah.
job somewhere, blue collar job somewhere, and called it good. And but
Yeah.
I
So
think
if you and your guests that are watching this look at the book, right? The picture you have up there, and if you look at the roof of the White House,
yes.
that's counter sniper.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but way up here,
Yes.
that there's 1, 2, 3. There might be one back in here, but
So
at least
right where your cursor is, behind that chimney, that glass you see is a police booth.
oh, right here.
Right. And when the
Yes.
counter sniper guys aren't up there, so they're up there when the president's in the mansion during the daytime, where he might come outside.
Okay.
At night, when he goes to what we call go to bed, which means he leaves the Oval Office, he goes into the mansion, and he's not scheduled to leave the White House. Then they go home.
Okay.
But if he's scheduled, they stay.
Yeah.
And they don't always change shifts. They might have to work 20 hours because there's so few of them, because they're hard to train. It's a very, very tough job. Don't judge them by what happened in Butler totally. Now, I'm their worst critic, but
I don't think you're the worst critic.
Well, I am. Well, let me put it to you this way. I'm probably their worst critic that knows what it is they do and what they were supposed to do and why, some of the reasons why they hesitated and why, it's one of the things I talk about in the second book is the Secret Service has expanded so many levels of management that they are literally killing themselves and almost the people they protect.
And when you say that, another visualization of that is like, when we were in school, in grade school, and we were learning about communication, right? And they'd say something at the start of one of the rows of a desk, and you had to turn around and whisper it to the person behind you. And by the time it got all the way around, it was a completely different message.
Yes.
So
I have a paper plate with potato chips on it, and by the time it gets around, is your mother just got run over by a car.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Right. And the reason the Secret Service and all agencies do it. The FBI does it. They all do it. They want to expand. That's the problem with a government. It always is expanding. It's like the freaking universe. I feel like one of those physicists. Keeps expanding, and that's what the Secret Service wanted to do. And what every federal law enforcement agency wants to do is have a budget like the FBI. And so the Secret Service in the late 80s, early 90s took the Uniform Division and broke it up. The Uniform Division reported from the most junior officer all the way to the chief. You had an officer, a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, an inspector, a deputy chief, an assistant chief, and then the chief. Now, there were 5, maybe 7 deputy chiefs of the different branches, and then that was it. And then the chief reported to the deputy director of the Secret Service.
Okay.
Or the director, and then, but technically he reported to the deputy director. What they did is they pretty much turned the chief into the Queen of England. He couldn't even order plane tickets for us to travel. And they broke it up into all these little small groups, and they put a GS 13, 14, and 15 in between them. And they expanded it greatly. And the counter sniper program used to be the sniper program that everybody emulated, because we, the Secret Service, I say we at the time, the Secret Service wanted a counter sniper program before John Kennedy died in Dallas, Texas. And they were told, 1, no administration wants people up on the roof with rifles because it makes their candidate look bad. Like nobody likes them. 2, the Treasury said, it's expensive and we're not paying for it. And then John Kennedy gets killed in Dallas, Texas, and then there's buckets of money for everything.
Right.
So the guys that the Secret Service was smart back then. Well, they had a director. It was a much smaller agency, less levels of management, and the director knew that he had at least 50 Uniform Division guys that were, or maybe even more, a couple hundred, that were from the Vietnam era They were Marines in Vietnam. They were Army. Some of them were SF,
Right.
SEALs. He knew that that's who he needed. So the Secret Service basically went to these guys and said, okay, we've got the okay to do this. How do we do it? And we had this guy, I don't remember his full name. He was a black guy who was in the Army during the Vietnam War. His name was Milborn. That was his last name. And everybody called him Millsy. That's the only way I knew him. I knew him for 15 years and didn't know his real name. So Millsy was the second most decorated sniper. Carlos Hathcock was the most decorated sniper in the Vietnam War. Millsy was like second.
Wow.
And so Millsy went to Carlos, they were friends, and said, hey, we're doing this. And he said, okay, this is what you need from me, blah, 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 blah. And then, the Secret Service is more involved in it than I'm making it sound. There were agents involved. But then they went to the Marine Corps sniper program, got information from everything that they had, they stole from the Marine Corps sniper program, the Army sniper program. And then later on, when Delta Force was invented from the SF, they have, the Secret Service has a very open door, both ways policy with all military special forces, and then anything else they need. Right. They have, the director of the Secret Service can commandeer military aircraft. They have a lot of authority. Even the agent even the GS-14 that might be in charge of a shift, when he's flying with the protectee, he can commandeer civilian planes. He can do whatever he has to in an emergency. But anyway, so they build this counter sniper program, and it's very good. It used to work very well. It was never needed. Like, they never fired on anybody, but it deterred so many things. And it was a great pair of eyes. It's helped save Bill Clinton's life in overseas one time during a funeral, because they could see a crowd coming, and actually in George Bush Sr. in Panama when there was a problem there. But anyway, so, and then they put all these levels of management in there, and they've door stopped it. They've screwed it up like everything else in the Secret Service. And again, it's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is to get the information out, because if you keep it in the dark, if you don't turn a light on it, nobody knows. Now, the other day when I was being interviewed by somebody, they said, you're the guy who blew the whistle on this, you and Congressman so-and-so. And I said, well, yeah, I remember when Congressman so-and-so, Chaffetz came out pretty hard years ago when he was still in Congress about the problems with the Secret Service, and they keep asking for money, but they don't tell us how they're going to fix these problems. And then, I wrote the book, and people wrote it. It does. The first book did very well because it had the 2016 campaign pushing it. The second book, 2 years later, was a history book about the Secret Service. And then there was some politics going on, and they actually sort of pigeonholed the second book, so it wouldn't be so. They squashed it with some other things, and it kind of got doxed, sort of, and that was fine. But it still sold like 40,000 copies. It still sells. They both still sell today, which is funny.
And they can be found on Amazon and all the other. Yeah,
the name of my publisher is Hachette. I got to look and spell it for you. Hang on.
Yeah. And then I can share.
They have a website that still has. You can get books. Oh, so Hachette is. Well, here's my ADD again. HACHETTE. Hachette Book Group.
Okay, and let's throw that.
You go on their website. They will. You can get the book through them. Paper, hardback, whatever, and then Amazon. And they're actually, you can still find them in bookstores and used bookstores. So the first one did great. It had the campaign pushing it. It sold. Oh
yeah, that is. So this is. Hang on, let's add that. So this is actually their
right.
Hachette's
oh, it is.
website.
Yeah.
Yeah. Took me a second. I was like, wait, that's the same one I already.
You know what? I see their little emblem in the corner.
Yeah.
They were very good to me. They took a huge risk with the first book, especially. And the first book made them a lot of money. We all did very well. And that's why they offered me the second book. The second book was supposed to be about assassination. That's all we were going to write about. assassination because during some research, my co-writer, Grant Schmidt, Dick and Nancy Schmidt's, at the time, he was 25 years old. He had graduated from Temple Film School, and he had a small film company that made videos and commercials, and he had done a very good documentary on the Holocaust survivors that were still alive in Israel, and he needed a new project. And he said, you should write your life story, and I'll help you, and we'll do it together. And I said, no, you're a jerk. No, you don't know what you're talking about. And so he wouldn't let it go. His parents called me up, invited me up to the big house in Montgomery County, and expensive steaks and good whiskey. And before I left that night, I told them it would never happen, but I agreed to bring it to my wife, who couldn't come that night. We're all very good friends. And that it would never happen, but I agreed to bring it to Jenny. And I said I would, for 4 months, I would work with Grant for 4 months. And I would give him some for like exercise purposes, like to help him learn how to write a book. And I would give him some stories. I'd give him a writing example. I would give him some police reports that I wrote, and I would tell him some stories. He had to, he would write it. I would edit it. I would write some. And, but he had to understand that we had to protect it. We copyrighted it. We did everything we had to. And he understood how that worked, and because of his films and stuff. And I told him in 4 months it was over, and it was a dead end. And that's not what happened. In 2 months, Grant and I had what we called 3 working chapters, and what we were calling the forward at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was still flying as an air marshal, working all the time. And I had read the 3 chapters Grant had given me in the forward, like, at home when I was watching my kids, and, I read them and I thought they were okay. And I just read them. I didn't edit anything. Right. So I was getting ready to fly the next day to Germany, and I thought I'll do it on the flight, in the hotel room, and on the way back. And I was very careful. I told Grant, you cannot tell people what we're doing. I don't know if this can even happen. And I said, here's the most important thing. 20 years later, I worked with a lot of great people. And if I did write a book, most of them wouldn't like it. And I don't want to harm anybody.
Right.
I'm going to write this. I'm going to give you this information I'm going to give you the real names. It's easier to tell the truth in the whole thing, and then go back. If we did work, and I said, if we were going to write a book, I would go back and change some of this. So you have to protect this crap. We did it on computer, and we secured it and everything. And we agreed that the only way we would print anything is when we were in the same room together. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. So that you could watch each other's backs and make sure that everybody's following.
Right. Yeah. Because Grant had nobody else had a dog in the fight but me. Nobody had anything to lose but me.
Right.
And because I thought as time went on and we decided to do this, I thought they're going to take my pension. I'm going to end up like G. Gordon Liddy. But, so anyway. So I say that because that's the thought that came to my mind when I was being forced to testify against Bill Clinton, that I'm going to end up in jail like G. Gordon Liddy. So anyway, we get these 3 chapters forward. When on the way to Germany, I'm reading it. I read it again when I get to the hotel. On the way home, I read it again, and I'm like, holy shit, I got to do this. Nobody else in the world, to my knowledge, was in a better position than me. I would have to retire. Nobody ever questioned a word I said. I took a polygraph test to get where I was. Nobody has ever said a negative thing about me that I work for. I have evaluations that you would think I could walk across your swimming pool. I mean,
wow.
I'm not blowing myself up.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying.
Listen, out of 100 people I worked with, I was -1, if you ask me. I worked with the greatest people ever. They were so good at what they did. They could work themselves to the death when they had to. They could work past beyond normal things and still do their jobs good. And I talked about earlier, learning from other people's behavior. I learned from them, a lot of them. And don't get me wrong, there's knuckleheads in every job, but I really thought that I had to do it. Here's the way I framed it up. Vote for Hillary Clinton. Don't vote for her. It's none of my business what you do in that booth. But at least be able to consider the history, experience of a guy who protected him, took a polygraph test to get there, was subpoenaed 6 times by the Starr investigation, Judge Starr. Then my case went all the way. Now, I say my case. There was about 24 to 27 of us, but I rose to the top. The first time in my life, I rise to the top of 25 people, and it's for a subpoena, my 6th subpoena. So, the Starr investigation figured out really quick during their investigation. They were subpoenaing people in secrecy for a long time, and unfortunately, they were smart. They got a list of Clinton people that were fired, and they were subpoenaing them because they were looking for somebody disgruntled. Well, they found the right person who was disgruntled at the Clintons and me. And he pointed out that I worked outside the Oval Office and I was there all the time. And he was right. And then later on, they found out, not too long after that, they found out there's 2 Congress requires the Secret Service to keep 2 logbooks at the White House. The one logbook is at the base of the elevator that goes up to the private living quarters. And everybody that gets on that elevator or goes up those steps gets recorded into that book if they're not a White House pass holder. So when Joe Biden's comes to the White House, somebody he knew and comes to the White House that's not a pass holder, we record their name in there.
And is that done by a Secret Service individual?
By the officer. That's his job. There's an officer at that post 24/7. When the president's in the residence, there's an agent there too. And then the agents have and I'm not telling you anything that's classified. You can pull up a picture of the White House and it'll tell you that the space across from this post underneath the steps that's literally called staircase is one of the Secret Service control centers for the White House. And there's another one under the West Wing called W16, which was just the sign on a door 70 years ago. The door, they put a door up and it said W16 on it. And I said, hey, that's what we'll call it. So anyway,
a lot of thought went into that one.
Oh yeah, cutting edge we were. So where was I? What was my point? I'm sorry.
Well, you were talking about if everybody who goes
right
that elevator,
right. So the other logbook is outside the Oval Office, and the officer, the E6 officer, like I was, and when you're assigned to that post, there's 2 people. There used to be 2 people assigned to it, E6 and E6A. E6, it's his post. That's my post. If you work there with me, if you're E6A, you don't work for me, but it's my post.
Right.
I set the schedule. We have to rotate every hour, but I set the schedule. And I had a guy who was most of my main partner was this guy who was very high strung, and he was not the greatest guy ever, but I liked him. But he was he didn't like to do 1 hour on, 1 hour off. He liked to do 2 hours. So I agreed to do it if I got the first 2 hours in the morning. So I could come in an hour early, skip roll call, work out in the morning before I went to work, eat breakfast, and then still have, and that's what we did. But I was outside the Oval Office all the time. I saw everything. The first day Monica Lewinsky snuck in there, I caught her. I just thought she was an intern trying to climb the ladder.
Now, when you say snuck in,
she circumvented every security procedure we had.
Oh my goodness! But you managed to catch her.
I caught a lot of things that other people. So, and I'm not blowing myself up, but you got to remember, I was in the Air Force for 4 years before I got there, and I had been a security guard at Boeing for a while. after I was building aircraft there for a while. And then I went to the Secret Service. So I had a lot of experience with dealing with people. And I knew when somebody was playing me or playing somebody. And I knew what the rules were. And I knew that an intern with an intern pass at the old executive office building was not supposed to be in the West Wing. Now, there were a few exceptions at times when their boss was working in the West Wing all day and they had to come over and deliver something. But she was clearly taking advantage of it. And I used to blow her up all the time. I threw her out of there so often, and I kept throwing her out of there until the one time I threw her out on a Saturday. Bill Clinton was in the Oval Office. She tried to deliver the stack of newspaper notes that he already had a copy of. And I knew, and I threw her out. And then 15 minutes later, the Oval Office door opened up and Bill Clinton said, "Hey, officer, there's going to be an intern delivering me something. Would you make sure would you knock on the door for me?" I go, "Sure. Yes, sir." He closed the door. I turned to the agent and the agent said, "I told you." And I said, and then I realized that all the rumors were true. And
right. Everybody has that aha moment, right?
Well, the trick is there were signs already, but my job was to protect him, not just physically, but his reputation.
Right.
So if you and I were working there together, if you were my partner, I would tell you, like before you relieve me, I tell you everything that's going on. Well, and I would tell you, I had to tell my partners that girl's in there. I don't know what they're doing, or whatever. Just so you know, she's in there, or I would tell you that this happened, or I know look at the schedule, during the time you're going to be here, this is going to happen or whatever. We had to brief each other, right. and you briefed the agents, and then as this escalated, and it was clear that he was having an affair with her, among others. That was the thing. Monica thinks she was his only girlfriend. She was one of 5 that I knew that was happening around the same time. Okay. And eventually, once, like I said, I thought I'd gotten away with it. We had all gotten away with it. 3 years had gone by. And then I'm at the training center. Before I become an instructor, I'm on the security detail. The uniform division started securing the training center, just like we did the White House. And I'm driving back from Fort Dix with 2 of my supervisors, a sergeant and lieutenant. We were at Fort Dix picking out surplus military equipment. Fort Dix used to be the depot for all surplus DOD.
Okay.
We had a friend who got us a red pass, and we could go in there with this stack of red passes and tag anything we wanted and come back and pick it up. So we were there at 7:00 in the morning, and we were tagging all kinds. We got 9 ATVs that we could turn into 5 working ATVs. And for the security patrol around the training center, we got a half a mile of 3/4 inch hemp rope. I don't know why, but we took it. And we took refrigerators, we got desks, stuff that we didn't have that we could use for certain things. And we got Dan Bongino's office. It was my buddy's office for me, but my friend Tim's office, we got them another refrigerator, and we got all kinds of stuff. And so we're coming back. I'm driving the government police car, the G-Rod, down the Jersey Turnpike, 85 miles an hour, and I'm still getting past, and I'm in the right lane, and all of a sudden, and my lieutenant insists on listening to Howard Stern, who I never liked. But and Howard Stern breaks the story. The guy who wrote the story about Monica Lewinsky from Newsweek, his name will come to me in a minute. When he took it to Newsweek, and he had it cold, 100%. He had corroborating evidence, witnesses who you could tell who they were, might not be their name, but you knew they were, anyway. He had it cold. But they panicked, and they wouldn't print it. He got pissed off. He walked out of the building. He called Matt Drudge from the Drudge Report, and Matt Drudge posted it the next morning. And that's how Howard Stern saw it, and he started talking about it. Well, I'm listening to him talk about it, and I'm flying down the road, and I look in the mirror, and I can see my face turning white. I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm going to puke. So I put on the turn signal or my flashers. I get off the side of the Jersey Turnpike and almost get us killed, because cars are flying by. I get out of the car and I'm puking. And my boss gets out and goes, what are you doing? I go, oh, I wipe my mouth. I'm like, we are so screwed. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, you listen to the radio? He goes, well, I can't now because I'm outside the car, And I said, we're screwed. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, Monica Lewinsky. Oh, we all knew about that broad or whatever. And I'm like, Matt, you didn't work in the West Wing. You don't know what was going on. We're exposed. Get back in the car. So I get back in the car. I get to the training center, and they're busting my chops the whole way. I don't say a word. Like I'm sick to my stomach. I see exactly how this is going to happen, and I was right. I mean, it ended up being this big case. I never saw it go to the Supreme Court. I figured I'd be run over by then, but I did see myself rising to the top, and I was afraid I would because I had stumbled onto them. I caught them one time, and it happened. It was innocent. He's in the Oval Office with her, and innocent from my perspective. I'm just working, right? Me and the agent out there, and Monica Lewinsky's in there, and my phone rings, and I pick it up, and this is a big deal. Like I can't get across to you guys like how serious this is. The phone rings, and it's the White House operator. There's if the White House operator calls you, it's a big deal because that's their only job is to connect the president of the United States to the rest of the world leaders.
Okay.
Right? It's a big deal. I pick up the phone. Officer Byrne, she knows who I am. Officer Byrne, this is because they have her schedule. Officer Byrne, this is White House operator 24 or 26. I said, yes, ma'am. She goes, we're trying to get a call through to the president. He's not picking up. I said, and she said, the staff, we know the staff's not in because we called them. I said, okay. I said, give me a minute. I put the phone on hold, rap on the door twice, open up the Oval Office door. I look in, the agent looks in. I walk in, I turn to my right, I rap on the hallway door. I don't hear anything, open the hallway door. I rap on the bathroom door. Nothing. Open the bathroom, he's not in there. Now I'm getting worried. I go to the study. I rap on the study. Mr. President, it's Officer Byrne. Oh, okay. What can I do for you? And as I'm saying, you have a phone call, I'm pushing the door open. And, I realized there's another person in there. I couldn't see, I knew what I was looking at, but I turned my head away. And I closed the door. I said, sir, you got an important phone call. He said, okay, I'll take it. And I went back. So when I walked out, the agent looked at me and goes, what did you see? I'm like, I don't know what to do. So, and I already knew what the rumors were. And I'd already seen things. So this had already happened. It happened a couple times. The first time it was tissue. So the Navy steward. So the president has 2 Navy stewards that are at his beck and call all day when he's in the West Wing. And then he has valets that are also Navy stewards that take care of him over in the mansion. And this is something that dates back to the Second World War. It's a cool piece of history. During the Second World War, Filipinos, you have to look at the context of our mentality at the time. Filipinos, you could argue, some people argue, look too much like Japanese. They could not get a security clearance. So they could be cooks, right? So the admiral of the Navy at the time, who I can't remember his name right now, who's the chief of the Navy at the time, has these Filipino stewards, they're called. They're not called cooks. Filipino stewards, they take care of him during the day. So when he goes to the White House one time, he brings the stewards with him to meet, he was meeting with FDR. And the stewards are in there, and FDR comments on how sharp they are and how, they're great. They take good care of you. And he has a little conversation with the stewards. So as a gift, the admiral sends them over. So, and they basically invent this Navy. The Navy does the kitchen in the West Wing during business hours.
Wow.
In the West Wing, not the mansion. That's the executive residence staff. It's a different group, but. So anyway, that's where these guys.
That is cool history.
Oh, it is great, and they used to be all Filipino men. over the years, as society's changed, it's changed a little bit, but they're still predominantly Filipinos. So where was I? There's what was I saying?
We were talking about the fact that the agent asked you what you saw.
Yeah, right. So I was talking about the steward. So what had happened before that was one of the stewards that took care of the president, Nelvis Baiani was his name. Nelvis, and I'm saying it because he's unfortunately public now because of the investigation, and he had to testify too. And so anyway, Nell, as we called him, came out of the study one day cleaning up after the president had been in there, and he had apparently been having phone sex with Monica Lewinsky, and there were tissues in there with semen, and he was embarrassed and he was mad, and it wasn't the first time it happened. And he's holding them, but they're sitting on a towel, and he's holding the tissues, and he's like, Byrne, look at this is blah 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 blah, and he just folds it up and he throws the whole thing in the trash.
The towel included.
Well, the tissues.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks later, it happens again, or sometime later, it happens again. But she was in there, and she had just left, and it was these towels, not the tissues. And so the towels were provided for the president to wipe his hands all the time. Whenever he's doing something publicly, you've probably seen it and don't even realize it. He'll be signing something or talking to somebody, and he shakes their hand, and you'll see a towel come from the side, and it's the steward handing him a wet towel, wipe his hands off. It's one of the things they do. And so anyway, all these towels are washed every day downstairs in the mess, and all the people that work down there are young seamen, sailors, and they know what semen is. So yeah. So when Nell comes out with the towels, and he's very disgruntled, and I feel bad for him, I grab a plastic trash bag out of the bottom of the trash can, and I said, throw them in here. And I knotted them up, and I put it in my gym bag. And then when I went home that day, I disposed of them in a dumpster. 3 years later, as I'm hurtling down the Jersey Turnpike, listening to Howard Stern go on and on about this affair that I know, and I'm like, I have destroyed evidence. I am fucked. I'm going.
Yeah, I mean that's where my mind went, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh.
No. Yeah. Well, legally, that's not exactly. It wasn't evidence. I didn't. You had to. It's the way I. They realized. When I told the story to the grand jury, to lawyers first, and then eventually when I had to, because I wasn't going to say anything. I'll get to that. So anyway, when I get home, when we get back to the training center that day, after we hear this Howard Stern thing, and I throw up, I pull my boss aside, my lieutenant, because he's friends with our chief. Our chief at the time is Rich Friedman, who's one of the nicest guys and a good UD officer. He got up to the level of sergeant, and then tested to become an agent, was an agent for 5 years. And then they wanted to transfer him out to California, and he had a sick child that could only get certain care on the East Coast.
Oh. So
he transferred back to the uniform division, and in a 15-year period rose to the position of chief. He was a great guy. And so anyway, I said, you're friends with Rich Friedman? He said, yeah. I said, don't screw your friend. You need to call him, personal phone call, and tell him, it's all over the news now. Tell him that we're exposed. We are hugely exposed. The uniform division, as well as the agents. I know all the stories from the road from the agents. We used to swap the stories, stand and post, of all the crazy shit that would happen. I said, we are screwed. He's like, you're overreacting, whatever. I said, so you're going to screw your friend? He goes, no, I'll make the call. I said, okay. So we have a couple more words, and Matt finally says, go work out again. You're such a pansy, or something like that. So I did. I went and I ran again. Then I went home, and I walked in the door, and my wife took one look at me, and she said, are you involved in this? Because it's all over the news, right?
Oh no.
It's constant news cycle. Bill Clinton.
Yeah, it really was. I remember that.
So I talked about Monica trying to befriend people. Did I say that? Or she was a
No.
ladder climber, right? I said she was a ladder climber. But one of the things she did is she tried to befriend people that she knew would put her in the path of Bill Clinton. She tried to befriend the Uniform Division people outside the Oval Office, some of the agents. She did befriend some of the agents, a couple of the other UD officers, and Betty Curry, Bill Clinton's secretary. So that's how she kept, and that's what I mean. She circumvented every security procedure. So I'll try to speed this up. So I get home that night, and like I said, I walked in the door, and Jenny goes, "Are you involved in this?" And I go, "Oh, you saw the news?" She goes, "Well, yeah." And the chief called, and I go, "What?" She goes, "Your chief, Rich Friedman?" She's reading it off a piece of paper. She goes, "Your chief, Rich Friedman? He called." Uh-oh. That's not normal, is it? I go, "Oh, no, it's not." You know. So she's like, "You need to call him back." And I said, and the whole time, though, I can see what's going to happen here. Like, I'm like, I cannot believe I got sucked into this guy's life. And I'm blaming myself. You're always doing your job, So, anyway, so I call Rick to Chief Friedman. I dial the phone number. Now, I've been there like 5 years. I mean, I've talked to the chief professionally. He's a nice guy. I actually worked out with him. He's very athletic. Phone rings. This little sweet voice answers the phone. I said, "Hello, ma'am. This is Officer Gary Byrne from the Uniform Division. I've been directed to call Chief Friedman at this number." She goes, "Yes, Gary. I know who you are." She said, "Hang on. Rich is on the other line." And I'm like, "You have two phones?" She's like, "Just take it easy, Gary." So I wait a minute. He gets on the phone. He goes, "Gary, do not tell me anything." He said, "Listen to what I have to say. Do not tell me anything. I understand what you told Matt. I am on the phone with the lawyers right now from the Secret Service. Don't tell me anything. The reason I'm saying that is it'll get more complicated," he said, "because they'll subpoena me too. So when you tell the story that the chief called you at home and you had to call him back, you told me nothing. You won't have to say anything that's not 100% accurate." And I said, "I understand, Chief." And, he said a couple other things, and he said, "No, Gary, so," and he used an analogy, and for the life of me, I can't remember what the analogy is.
Well, that's a lot going on
in
a short period of time. Yeah. So
I already worked out twice that day. When I hang up the phone, I go out and run again. I'm begging. I'm praying somebody hits me.
Oh no.
So I'm still talking to the chief, and I forget the analogy he used, but he said, I think he might have said, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we? And I said, well, if 1 is nothing and 10 is, I think he said it, 10 is very serious. And I said, "Chief, we went past 10 3 years ago." I said, he goes, "Okay, Gary." He said, "Somebody going to be home tonight. We're going to have some different directions for you tomorrow." He said, "Now I can tell you, Matt's going to call you, but his is what he's going to tell you. He's going to tell you to put on a suit tomorrow morning, drive to the training center, drop your car off, take a G-Rod, a Tahoe, drive to headquarters, and you're assigned there to further notice." And I said, "I'm going to jail." And he said, "You're not." And I said, "You're going to have to fire me, aren't you?" And he said, "Not before I resign." And I said, "Okay." And I hung up the phone. And then everybody else that was involved, there was about 12 people that he had that same phone call with almost that night. So I imagine he got 10 minutes of sleep that night.
Oh my gosh.
And then and we were calling each other. We knew, like, I knew who else was exposed. And I knew who I had told things to. And in the beginning, they tried to make it look like we're a bunch of busybodies and and like it was a episode of Mayberry RFD where everybody's telling the operator their business, but you had to tell the people you worked with what was happening.
Right. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Because otherwise, the whole goal of protecting the president goes out the window.
Yeah. So just to catch up, so the story's broken. It's all happened 3 years before. What else you need to know is I threw Monica out of the West Wing about 3 times, and then I went to. So when I realized what's happening, as it's happening, so this is 3 years before the story breaks, roughly. The White House, the West Wing, that Bill Clinton switches chief of staffs. Mac McLarty leaves, his childhood friend, and Leon Panetta, a congressman from California, becomes chief of staff. Leon Panetta is a former military officer, one of the nicest men I've ever met in my life, professional. He was excellent chief of staff, but he didn't know what, I don't think he knew how the sausage was being made, so to speak, when it came to the Clintons, what was real and what wasn't. I don't know what he knew, but I would tell you that he doesn't conduct his life that way, and neither does his stellar family. So anyway, Panetta becomes chief of staff. He appoints a woman as a deputy, one of the deputy chiefs of staff, and then another guy is the other chief of staff is a guy that's been there. His name is Harold Ickes Jr. And that's significant because his father was Harold Ickes Sr., who was an advisor to Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Okay.
So his son now works for Bill Clinton, and he's a huge Democratic operator. He's a lawyer. Anyway, so the woman they hire, her name is Evelyn Lieberman. She's this very short, sort of large woman who wears the most impeccable clothes you've ever seen in your life. The first time I met her, I was like, oh, first time I met her, she yelled at me. And I turned to her and I said, we're going to get along just fine. Now step back before I punch you. And so we had this great rapport. And she was a taskmaster. It was what the Clintons needed. Bill Clinton needed somebody to pull him by the ear from appointment to appointment. He needed somebody to slap him and say, stop looking at these women like they're cheesesteaks,
Right.
But that's not what her job was. Her job was to get the agenda done. And she was a taskmaster. So another incident happened, just like the one I described to you, but a little bit worse, with a friend of mine. And he was covering my post when it happened. So I feel like, when it happened, I'm like, oh, crap. So I decide on my own that I'm going to go to Evelyn Lieberman, and I'm weighing over my pay grade here. This is director level shit. And but I feel like because I have this rapport with her, and I really have a good rapport with Panetta, and I like these people, and I don't think they know that they are flying down the tracks and nobody's watching.
Yeah.
I don't think they know that how exposed they are, what this girl's doing, what this woman is. First of all, she's circumvented all those Secret Service protocols and security. She's in the West Wing. She's having this. It's obvious she's having an affair. So I go to Evelyn Lieberman one day. I'm on first name basis with her assistant. I knock on the door. She said, Gary, how can I help you? I said, I need 5 minutes with Evelyn. I said, I know this is unusual. If you two are smart, you'll pick up the phone, call the director, and have me removed. I shouldn't even be here, but I feel like I need to make Evelyn aware of something. She said, we're good, Gary. Come back in 10 minutes. Or she said, I'll ring your phone. She did. I went back down there. I had somebody relieve me. I went back down there. And I walked in and she said, what can I do for you, Officer Byrne?
That little ribbon.
Yeah. I go, well, what you should do is pick up the phone and call the chief or the director and have me removed because I'm weighing over my head here. But I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and then you do whatever you think is right. I said, do you know who the intern Monica Lewinsky is? And when I said it, you could just, she like, oh shit, and I said, if I were you, I would remove her from what she does here. I would not let her in the West Wing anymore. I cannot go into any detail, and I won't. And if you want to have me removed, go right ahead. And before you say I'll have you fired if I don't tell you, realize that you can't fire me, and the Secret Service won't fire me for something like this. I'm looking out for your behalf, really. And I said, I like you and I like Mr. Panetta, and I don't think you have a complete grasp of what happens sometimes. And she said, thank you for the information, Mr. Byrne. I appreciate it. And as I walked out, I thought, fuck, she just called me Mr. Byrne and not Officer Byrne. I'm fucked. So
yeah, right. Yeah, the hammer's going to come down soon.
Yeah, I went back to post, and then I went home, and
thinking about it the whole time, right?
Yeah, but there was a lot of other shit going on in my life, So
yeah.
So I go home, and I come back in the next day, and afternoons, and so day work's already there. I'm pushing my friend Sandy Vernon off, and she goes, "I got a weird phone call today." I go, "Okay, She said, I got a call from Monica Lewinsky sobbing. She got kicked out of the West Wing. They're transferring her to the Pentagon. And I said, oh, okay. She says you did it. I said, yeah, I had her transferred to the Pentagon. I said, tomorrow I'm getting my own airplane. I said, tomorrow I'm getting my own SR-71 or something, And she goes, do you know anything about it? I said, yeah, I know there's some things about it. I said, it's probably better if I don't tell you all the details. There was a conversation with some of the senior staff. And she said, did they come to you? And I said, no, they didn't. And I said, Sandy, I realize you're friends, but your loyalty is to me, not the Secret Service, not to your job, to me. And she goes, I know. I said, okay. She goes, I'm going to need to know what happened. So I said, all right, not now. No, she said, I want to know.
Okay.
And then later on, I did tell her. I told her the whole thing. And I said, listen, I'm not picking on you or anybody else that befriended her. She worked hard to fool you guys. But that was what she was doing. She goes, well, I don't see it that way. And I said, you don't have to. Nobody has to see it my way. But I'm just telling you, this is what I did. I said, and if I end up falling on a hand grenade because of it, so be it. So she goes to the Pentagon. No, I'm sorry. She didn't go to the Pentagon yet. They transfer her. They transfer her. They move her over back to her job in the old executive office building, and they take away her ability to come over the West Wing. And then, is that right? No, I'm mixing my own story up. No, they transfer her to the Pentagon. They don't fire her. They transfer her to the Pentagon because in the meantime, she's already gone from an intern with the pass that we allow to come over once in a while to a full White House pass. And Bill Clinton got that done when we refused her entry one time on a Saturday. That Saturday I talked about before.
Yeah.
So, and that was the other thing too that was very significant the day that I refused to let her in there, and I said that she left, and then he came out and said, hey, there'll be an intern coming around.
Yeah.
How did you know I refused her entry?
Because she told them.
How though? How do you pick up the phone? How does an intern contact the president of the United States? No, I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just.
No, I know. Well, obviously she has a direct number.
Is that normal, you think?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So let me go one little further. There were 200 interns working for the Clintons at that time. I'll give anybody $1 if they can name another one. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I have no clue.
Yeah. So when I had that revelation that day, I knew exactly what he did.
Yeah.
He gave her a phone number that it's for the Joint Chiefs. It's for his wife. It's for his child. It will ring behind his desk. It doesn't go to the White House switchboard. They know it's ringing. It rings behind his desk. It's like the first version of a touch-tone phone. It's black. It sits on the back desk. 12 people in the world don't have that. Well, Joint Chiefs, 20 people don't have that number. And when you dial it, you dial a 12-digit number and then you hear a tone, and then there's a code that goes with it, and you have to dial the code in the rhythm of a song. I won't tell you what it is because they probably still have it, but it's 5 digits. You have to dial it in a rhythm. If you don't, it hangs up.
How funny.
So that revelation that day is when I knew, like, oh, this is one day when this blows up, it's going to be ugly. Because I mean, he gave her a phone number. It's not supposed to go out. I mean, he's the president of the United States. He can give it to anybody, but it's not like giving it to your college buddy so when they get drunk they can call you. Hey, Phil.
Right.
This is a girl that you're having an affair with who's only 2 years older than your daughter.
Right.
And she's one of nobody knew this at the time. And I don't know that it's 100% accurate, but to my knowledge at the time, she was one of five people that women he was having affairs with. And other staff members and that I would tell you, and I eventually had to testify to, that they were hired just for that reason. In my opinion.
Okay, so were they his direct interns?
No, they weren't interns. They had real jobs. They had pretty serious jobs, but the 2 of them were his former high school girlfriends.
Oh, wow.
And she said to me, I'm not here just because I'm a good employee. And I said, well, that's uncomfortable. Goodbye.
Wow. See, and that's why I like where I'm at, right, in life, where it's like, because that was the question actually I thought of in the middle of this when you were talking about this, is how uncomfortable did this have to be for you, right?
It got really bad. I almost resigned.
And the fact that you didn't is amazing. And I'm going to jump in. I've got a couple questions for you here. The first one, now again, if you can't answer, don't feel comfortable answering, that's fine. So Christine White, her question is Hillary nicer than she appears on TV, or is she really as hateful as I think?
So I will tell you, what was the girl's name? Christine.
Christine.
Yeah, Christine. So when I was writing the first book, we were at my house most of the time, and Grant and I, my co-writer, were arguing about something. And I was trying to get a point across to him. And my wife walked into the room, and she looked at me, and she said, "Gary, you used to come home from work and look at me and say, that crazy bitch is Satan."
Oh, wow.
I will say to you that, and it still pains me to this day to say this, but she doesn't have a redeemable value. Bill Clinton, listen, he's a funny guy. He's a nice guy. You want to have a beer with him. You don't let him drive your 27-year-old niece home.
Oh,
you got to keep.
He can play the saxophone. I do know that.
Yeah,
or at least he said he did. Well,
he
did.
In public. He played the saxophone.
Yeah,
but they only did it because it looked cool, and it was on Arsenio Hall, and he hadn't played the saxophone for 20 years before that. It was just a gimmick. But anyway, but Hillary is who I described in Crisis of Character. She has got some issues. She is angry all the time. She has never accomplished anything. And I actually, when they first came in to office, and she was kind of nice for the first couple of months until the first project that she appointed herself. She had an office in the West Wing. That's not normal. She was a lawyer. They tried to say it's because she was a lawyer. So one of the first things she tried to do was a universal health care thing, and it failed. And after that,
I remember that.
Yeah, she blamed everybody but herself. And the truth is, the reason they had so many leaks is because when they would have a meeting in the West Wing, they would walk out and leave all the material on the table.
And you'd have to go in and scoop it up.
No, because
that wasn't classified, was it?
Right, and it's not right.
Okay.
And so the cleaning staff would come in. Now, I will tell you that a couple of times when I was there, the cleaning staff would say, "What do you want us to do with this?" And I could see they were uncomfortable. I said, "Pile it up, throw it in the bag, give it to me, and I'll put it in my safe and then tell somebody or put it in a Byrne bag." But what I did was I took it down to Leon Panetta's office when I got off post because his assistant was still there, and I knocked on the door and I dropped the trash bag on her desk, and she said, "You're bringing me the trash?" I go, "No, this is all the material that the first ladies group left in there. You probably don't want it getting out, or you don't want the cleaners picking it up. She's like, oh, is that your job to do that? I go, no, it's not. The cleaners brought it to me. She goes, oh, well, I'll make sure Leon takes care of that. And or McLarty, whoever was there at the time. So anyway, so then finally somebody got appointed. Somebody realized that there's not a magic fairy that comes through and cleans up after them. But that's why it all got leaked out. And she's just incompetent. And she the one thing that she ever did was she got a guy who raped a 12-year-old off. That's what she did.
And I think that was news. I mean, that was
had been You know what the first thing she did was? Time. You know what her first job was as an adult? She got fired from the Watergate hearings. Hillary Clinton was a young lawyer hired by the Democratic Party to investigate Richard Nixon and the lead Democrat fired her because she submitted a report that was completely falsified.
Wow.
He fired her there's actually, you can still Google it and find it. They keep trying to take it off, but somebody puts it back on social media somewhere. And
I don't think anything ever really goes away on the internet.
It's a black and white picture. I think it's the Washington Times or Post. And she's got these big glasses on. She's standing next to this lawyer. And it's Hillary Clinton. She's like early 20s. It's before she meets Bill, I guess. Or maybe after. Anyway. And so that was her first big job. She got fired for lying. That's who she is. She's a woman that I described as Satan. I've seen her berate people in public, and it gets her off. It excites her. Like she gets excited when she can embarrass somebody in public, and she loves to mix up with the men and be like one of them. And you got to remember, I've spent thousands of hours watching these people while I was protecting them, and she does the most bizarre thing. So unfortunately, my answer to that young lady is that she is who I described. She is any negative description you've heard of her, except for I don't know for a fact that she drinks the blood of children. But
oh no.
But I mean, that's what I've,
I don't know that I've heard that one, but
just saying,
it's some bad things.
No, it's out there. So I got a real question one time about, actually it was, I want to say, I think it was Jesse Waters on Fox who asked me one time if she was an alcoholic. And I said, I'm going to tell you the truth. I never saw her touch a drink. I didn't. She may be an alcoholic, but I never saw it. Yeah. I saw Bill Clinton once in a while drink alcohol, a beer on the golf course. When they went to Ireland, they had the ceremonial Guinness. He drank a little bit, but not, but I never saw her. To me, like, I would have realized if she was intoxicated, because it probably would have made her a little bit easier to be around. I don't know. She was just always so uptight. And she, there's a guy out there named Buzz Patterson, who used to be a military aide. And Buzz.
I know that name.
Yeah, Buzz Patterson. You probably know him from X or Twitter. He wrote a book about his time with the Clintons too.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I saw it on this shelf.
Yeah, he's a former Air Force pilot. Command officer. He was a military aide when I was there, and we did a couple of radio shows together in the beginning when I wrote the first book. He talks about being on the elevator with her and the president, because he carried the football, the military codes for the nuclear deterrence, and she would, the same behavior that I saw was the same behavior that he saw. She would berate him. Something would go wrong, and she'd berate the shit out of the president. Be cussing at him like a drunken sailor, and then the doors would open up and they'd walk off and the cameras would start snapping, and and I can describe to you something you can actually Google YouTube, search on YouTube. So go back, your listeners, go back and figure out the date that the Monica Lewinsky story broke, and then the date that Bill Clinton had to give that speech where he admits that they did have an affair. He doesn't call it an affair. He says an inappropriate relationship. Anyway, whatever that date is.
Sexual relation?
He didn't say that. No.
What?
Because you know how he defended himself? Oral sex is not sex.
Well, I do remember him saying that. Yeah, I do remember him.
And I said, if you can get Mrs. Byrne to believe that, I'm in. But it ain't gonna happen. If it involves your Winky, it's sex. But anyway, so if you Google that, get that date, and then go on YouTube and Google like Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton getting off helicopter and put that date in or around that date, and it'll bring up a video, and it's the first time they're returning from Camp David after she finds out it's true. And she doesn't find out from him. He doesn't have the balls to tell her. He sends his lawyer over to tell her that he was having an affair with her.
Oh.
And that the blue dress is real.
Oh,
but he is guilty as sin.
Having this inside track. Oh my gosh.
He sends his lawyer, Bill Bennett, over. I'll tell you another little tidbit. Bill Clinton came pretty close to being the first president to ever have a penis line up.
No.
Yes, ma'am.
What? Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
So the Monica Lewinsky story breaks. What people don't know is the Paula Jones story from Arkansas is on its way to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So when Paula Jones is there trying to get her case reinstated, it's public knowledge. And the Clinton defenders are like, oh, that's what you get when you drag $100 bill through a trailer park. Well, they don't talk about what's at the other end of that string, which would be Bill Clinton, right? So anyway, that's how they frame up everybody who accuses Bill Clinton. Like, they're floozies. Everybody does it. He's one of the boys. It's all good. So anyway, Paula Jones is in Washington trying to get her case reinstated. A woman walks into the hotel, the restaurant where Paula Jones is eating with her lawyers, introduces herself, hands the lawyer a piece of paper, tells her she works in the White House or works in the government, and that Bill Clinton is having an affair with an intern named Monica Lewinsky. And that's what blew the doors off this thing. And then they found out about the blue dress that Linda Tripp had, and everybody likes to bash Linda Tripp in this story. Linda Tripp is one of the few people besides the Secret Service people who did the legal thing. She was friends with Monica Lewinsky. She knew what Monica was doing. Monica was bragging about this affair to Linda, to her friend in Japan, who had to come all the way back from Japan to testify that she knew Bill Clinton was getting Hummers from Monica. And, and the story just went crazy. And
as it should have, right?
No, right. But my biggest problem is there were some really good people in the Secret Service, and there was a few in the staff that were sort of innocent in this, and we got shit on. And I'm not just, my biggest complaint isn't about what happened to me. It's that some of my coworkers, it was worse on them. I knew what had happened. They got blindsided, and actually some of them berated me for not telling them more. And I thought, well, if I had told you more, you'd be more exposed. I made it very clear there was something wrong, and there were other things that had happened that, that involved some of the whole time this is happening, when Bill Clinton's having this affair with the intern Monica Lewinsky, when this blows up, the Secret Service people involved in this, the uniform division guys, who myself and the rest of them who get subpoenaed and then have to start giving testimony at the Secret Service headquarters to these Department of Justice lawyers who are supposedly representing us. But they can't really represent us because we're all government employees. There's no attorney-client privilege. And so it became very clear very fast that they were getting all this information from us, and somebody was giving it right to the Clintons, right to Hillary. Because there's 2 or 3 things happened where there's no way in hell anybody knew about it unless these lawyers told them.
Right.
Because we weren't telling anybody. And so I lost my train of thought again. Oh no, I got it. So Linda Tripp convinces Monica to keep the blue dress, which sort of saved us. because there was DNA to prove because it wasn't like it was going to go away, and it would have just been our word against theirs. And I'll tell you something else too. After a month, every day going down to Secret Service headquarters, meeting with the same Justice Department attorneys who are trying to convince me and the other officers and the few agents that we can trust them, and we don't. I mean, at first I was just kind of neutral until something happened, and this is what it was. We're not supposed to talk to each other. They take us off all our overtime. All the officers are pissed off because we live on our overtime.
Right.
We don't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
We work all the time. And some of the, my friend Sandy had 3 kids, and her husband was in the uniform division. And, anyway, so there was all kinds of problems with that. And and then one of the things was they didn't really understand what we did. And they had kind of a flippant attitude. The lawyers at first really thought it was all a lie. They didn't believe Bill Clinton was having an affair with her or anyone else until then. This is the last day they had all 15 of us together, 15 uniforms. We're all in this conference room, and one of them makes a comment about we might be able to get through this once it's proved it's not true. And we all looked at each other and we're like, and one of the other guys goes, "Are you drunk?" And the lawyer goes, "What?" He goes, "Are you drunk?" She goes, "No." He goes, "Are you telling us you don't think this is real?" He goes, and he just went into this tirade. He goes, "Oh my God, you really think this is made up?" And, so the Secret Service lawyers are like, whoa, don't say anything else, And so 3 of them get up and start to walk out, like, go to hell. We're also dealing with it. We're also being represented by the local police union lawyer. They were. I separated myself because I felt like, based on what I experienced, I felt like I was going to end up hurting them. I didn't want to take them down with me. I really did.
Because you probably had the most contact with her.
Yeah, and I was 100% sure nobody else saw what I saw and then went to Evelyn Lieberman and had her removed. And in hindsight, I was like, I put a red flag right on my, shoot me,
Yeah.
And so, and I knew it was all going to come out. And so anyway, and there were so many staff members that had already been subpoenaed privately, former staff members. I said before, they made a list of everybody that had gotten fired by the Clinton administration, and there was a big list of them, and they had an axe to grind, and some of them had an axe to grind with me, and they did, and it became very clear that I rose to the top. Eventually, I was going down there every day, all day long. My case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the chief of the Supreme Court at the time was Judge Rehnquist, and he sent a message back through the Secret Service that said, "I sympathize with Officer Byrne and the other officers, but they're federal law enforcement. Byrne has 72 hours to voluntarily go into the grand jury or be prosecuted for obstruction of justice." And they had already threatened to lock me up.
Wow.
In front of my pregnant wife. And then and when that was said, I took a swing at the FBI agent that was in the room with me that was taking testimony from me, and that got pretty ugly. And then what nobody knew was, and you don't know it till now, is I was being secretly represented by a friend of mine, Mark Halbrin. It's public knowledge now. Mark Halbrin is an attorney, and his first job out of Embry-Riddle Law School was an attorney for the CIA. And then when I first met him, he was a chief of staff and a lawyer for former Pennsylvania Senator Arlen Specter. And so when the story broke, Mark was my first phone call. Mark is my sister's brother-in-law. We had been friends for years. I used to, Mark and his wife and I are friends. And so anyway, I called Mark. I got Mark's phone number, and I called my sister and I said, "Listen, I can't." And the story was out, but it was just getting legs. And I said, "I can't go into detail, but I need to talk to Mark Halbrin, and it's got to be today. I don't give a shit where he is. Get your sister-in-law on the phone and get her husband on the phone with me." And my sister's like, "Okay." So, a little shortly later, Mark called, and he was howling on the phone. because he'd already known my name had already been, he was like,
Oh,
"You're
no.
so screwed. You're gonna die in a one-car Arkansas suicide."
Oh my gosh.
So after he busted my balls for a little while, he goes, "Okay, what's going on?" So I walked him through what was happening, and I said, "I'm really exposed here." I said, "I won't go anywhere on the phone." He said, "Okay, I know what to do. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do." He said, "But I'm going to call you back shortly." And this is before we all had cell phones. And
Right.
people at my level in the Secret Service didn't have pagers. So are we running out of time?
Nope, not at all. I'm just rubbing my arm.
Okay. So people at my level didn't have pagers, and what cell phones we had were these big giant bricks that were usually in the patrol cars. So anyway.
Yeah, the ones in a bag, right?
Right.
The black
well,
ones.
yeah. Or we had the fancy Motorola ones. It sort of looked like a phone, but it weighed about 4 pounds.
Yeah.
And it was.
And you had to pull out that great big antenna.
It cost 4 cents a minute to talk on it. $4 a minute. I'm sorry, $4 a minute.
Wow.
So anyway, so this is what happens with Mark. Mark goes to his law firm and says, "I have a friend who is in the Secret Service. He is involved in this Judge Starr investigation, impeachment. He needs representation, as you all know." And I'm kind of telling you what the letter was, the email that Mark sent to the partners, and said, "As you know, we can represent him, and he has no responsibility to tell anybody." And I didn't. He said, "But we have to do it pro bono because my friend makes $42,000 a year, and we bill." Then they probably billed $350 an hour,
right?
In 15-minute increments, So anyway, he called me back. He told me to give them a fax number. They sent me an agreement. I signed it. I faxed it back to him. And then they were representing me. And it was a little clandestine. Like, I would go and give testimony all day long at the Secret Service. This was supposed to be in lieu of the grand jury. This is the first or second lie. The second or third lie they told us. If we gave all this testimony, we would never have to go in front of a human grand jury. That was bullshit. And so we gave. I'd given 25 hours of testimony before the case went to the Supreme Court, and that's just me. Everybody. And this is.
And you'll never get that time back.
Yeah, you can Google this. Our testimony is on. It was given to C-SPAN. That was the third lie. This will never be released. No, they said the Justice Department will never release this. What they didn't tell us was it wasn't the Justice Department's. It belonged to Congress.
Yeah.
Because they're paying for it. And Congress released it. And it was horrendous. So I'll tell you that part of the story. So I'm at home. We're living in a temporary, we call it the shit box in Arnold, Maryland, which is near Annapolis. It was a great neighborhood, but it was an old townhouse that was falling down. We were renting it while we were building our house on Kent Island at the time. Our daughter was just born. And so she was born December 19th. She's an infant. It must be like the 1st of January. And, the impeachment has happened. They didn't remove him from office, but there's still stuff going on. He has to surrender his legal license. All this embarrassment has happened.
Yeah.
And I think it's over. So one day the phone rings and I pick it up and I hear my friend Sandy Byrne, who was also subpoenaed. We worked together. She was afternoons. I was day work. When I was day work, she was afternoons. Anyway, she is screaming over the phone. They fucked us. Her voice is cracking. They fucked us.
Oh, no.
I said, Sandy, take a deep breath. What's wrong? She goes, turn on the TV. You're on TV. I said, what am I doing? She said, you're testifying about Bill Clinton. I'm like, what are you talking about? They said they would never release it. She said, no, those effing lawyers said they would never release it. What they didn't tell us was they don't own it. It's Congress's. And Congress released every minute.
Goodness.
So I didn't have cable TV because we were living there temporarily. Across the street, there was this neighbor that we weren't great friends, but they were very polite. We used to wave to each other all the time. Their kids were outside. I'd go over and say hi. when Elizabeth was born, they put a little gift on the step. It was very, very nice people. So I go running over there, knock on the door. Hey, Gary, what's up? I go, this is going to sound kind of weird, but do you have cable? He said, yeah. I said, there's something happening in my life. I need to see cable TV right now. Can I? Yeah. He goes, come down the basement. I'm down there watching all the kids. There's neighbors' kids. And, I go down there. There's like 9 kids. They're all running around. There's TVs on. I think it's like Sesame Street's on or something. So he starts going through the clicker, and I'm looking at him, I'm like, shaking. And he hands me the clicker, and I'm like, and all of a sudden I stop, and there I am. It's on C-SPAN. I stopped on C-SPAN. C-SPAN 2 it was.
C-SPAN 2.
Right. And there I am. And there's a little thing.
The little ticker that goes across the bottom?
It says Officer Gary Byrne of the United States Secret Service Uniform Division testifying in the Bill Clinton impeachment. And there's sound, and there I am. And all of a sudden, all the kids stop moving, and they look at the TV, and they look at me, and they look at the TV, and they're like, that's you. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And the guy goes, my neighbor,
he's looking at you like you've got 5 heads.
Yeah, he goes, Gary, you're fucked. I go, yeah, no shit. He goes, I always wondered what you did. He goes, I thought you were in the FBI. I go, no, I was in the Secret Service Uniform Division. I'm pretty sure that's over, So I went home, and of course my phone's ringing. People are saying it. And I called one of the lawyers. I still had their phone numbers. And I said, hey, why am I watching this? And this is what she said. Hey, congratulations on your baby. Enjoy your new family. Click.
Oh.
I told myself someday when I'm an old man, she's going to be crossing the street.
Oh, goodness.
And it turned out later on that she was the one feeding all the information to whoever wanted to listen so she could get her next grade up in the Justice Department because she could help her buddy Bill Clinton. And that's what it was. And I'm not bitter, really. I joke about it, but I'm not really bitter. Everybody does what they do, and they have to atone for their actions later on in life.
But I've got a couple questions for you. Well, 2 questions, I guess. So Jim JCL says, I heard that Hillary also had her share of extramarital stuff. Did you see or hear any of that? Yeah.
So and I heard this. So the first time I heard this was from literally a staff member from Arkansas, a guy that worked for the Clintons, a girl, that worked for the Clintons in Arkansas. And it wasn't that we were particularly good friends, but whenever we ended up working together, like on details, like out of town, and I ended up working near her, she had this inability to stop from spilling her guts, and she's the one that first told me about the rumor that Chelsea Clinton is actually Webb Hubbell's daughter. Really? They believe people in Arkansas, Webb Hubbell was a lawyer that Hillary worked for. And the story was that Webb Hubbell was Chelsea's father. And then later on, another staff member said that wasn't true, that Vince Foster was Chelsea's father.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I will tell you another thing. So there was always a rumor that she was either gay or bisexual, right? And so
the daughter?
Hillary.
Oh. Okay.
So
Gosh, I'm learning so much.
There was a rumor that she was either bisexual or gay. And somebody asked me that one time, actually on a TV show, or it was a radio show, I think. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know it to be true, but I will tell you a story. This is what happened. Bill Clinton was overseas and Hillary didn't go. Chelsea was in college. And every first family, the Secret Service gives them a set of duress devices. Mm-hmm. It could be in the house, it might be a picture. You push the picture over, sets off a duress. And you know that when you do that, we are coming. And we are coming like there's trouble.
Right.
Because you've told us there's trouble. And then they also have a device they keep on them sometimes so when they go into the bathroom stall, we don't have to leave the door open, or they can have a little privacy at times. And so anyway, when they're not in the living quarters, we're able, the way it's set up, we're able to give them some space without, it is secured enough where we know they can be on their own, but there are still ways to let us know they need help. So let the Secret Service know that they need help. So anyway, one night, one of the agents I worked with, and I heard the story straight from his mouth, like a lot of them, was he was on break in W16, and it was late at night, and they got a signal, and he charged upstairs and started throwing doors open, and the other agent was throwing doors open, and one of the ushers ran up with them, and the usher threw the door open to one of the bedrooms, and there was Hillary with another woman in bed. But they were sitting there with the covers up, and they were laughing. And it was clear that the girl had set it off on purpose. So my interpretation of it was that they did it as a joke, that she told the girl, hey, if you push that over, these guys will come up like no NFL player could come up here like these guys,
right? Whatever.
She said something like that. That was the way I took it. And then she said, whoa, wouldn't it be funny if we got into bed? Because they pulled the covers up. So, so that happened. And whether that was just a joke or whatever, that's what happened. And that's what he told me. I know it's true because you don't tell those things. It's for a reason, because when it happens to you, you'll have some familiarity with it. Right. And they're during the when I first started working at the White House, George H.W. Bush was president, and we got in a fire alarm one time, and we run up. Well, so I'm walking through the mansion just coincidentally, and the control center comes over and goes, any officer available to respond to the private living quarters, we have a fire alarm.
Oh, wow.
Smoke and heat. And I'm like, oh, me. And I turn around and I'm like, look, and the officer standing there points to the steps. Gary, steps, run up, So I start running up the steps. And as I'm going up, I see a fire extinguisher, and I grab it and I get up there, and there's an agent comes off the elevator. He's got a fire extinguisher, and we run in, we see smoke. We run into the kitchen, and there's Barbara Bush with the window open, waving smoke out the window. Her grandkids put in popcorn in the microwave. Instead of pushing 3 minutes, he pushed 30 minutes.
Oh.
He set it on fire.
Yeah. That would do it.
She was so embarrassed, and it was very funny, and my face was as red as a beet, and I had pulled the pin on the extinguisher, so I'm like, shit, now I got to explain that, which was no big deal. And,
right. Interestingly enough, okay, so did you know, obviously you would have known Chelsea, right?
Yeah, sure, a little bit.
When she went to college,
I went with her.
Did you really?
When we dropped her off, I was there for a week. Yeah, I didn't stay the whole time.
So she had a boyfriend.
Yeah,
and he was from Nevada.
Yeah,
I actually knew him.
So yeah,
and he went to school at my high school alma mater.
Yeah,
and that's how I knew that he actually was dating Chelsea.
Yeah, so.
And I can't remember his name for the life of it, but I knew he was he was a kicker.
Yeah, I never knew his name, but I do know there was one. I do know that there was a boyfriend, and that's who you're talking about. Yeah. Because there was I can't go into too many details, but there was a very serious security concern with Chelsea in her second year at Berkeley. So serious that we doubled the size of her detail, and we put 4 men, and when I say men, I mean 4 guys that from the counter assault team with M16s were never more than 50 feet from her.
Wasn't there something like she had been in a bar or something, or am I thinking of something else?
Yeah, you're thinking of something else. But she was a little involved in this was a threat from outside.
Yeah,
and it was taken very seriously.
Yeah, well, yeah, which makes sense.
And so that's why I know about, because when these guys were rotating in every week because it was a temporary detail and they were beefing up so one of the things they Secret Service tried to do, listen, they don't screw everything up, but they tried to get young agents. Like when they realized Chelsea was going to college, they knew. And so a
Mhm.
year before, they start interviewing new recruits that were hiring who seem to have their act together. And they're looking for agents who've been on for a couple of years. They're young. We can
That
give
can
them
blend in a little better.
right. We can give them a backpack. We let them cut their hair like a college kid, and they can blend in. And
Right.
and so that's what they did. And they had quite a few of them. And then you had your regular Secret Service women and men who were the thumpers. They were the decision makers. They were the people responsible for her safety. I mean, everybody was, but some of these agents were there because they were so young and they blended in. They hadn't been out of college that long. And don't get me wrong, they weren't incompetent. They were just young and inexperienced. And so when they put these, and I happened to be working, I was an instructor at the time. And so when they put this together, it was done in 15 minutes. When they verified what this threat was, they contacted these guys. One of the guys came to the training center in a jacket and tie. He was at a wedding. And they changed right there, got their equipment, and went to the airport and literally carried their M16s on the plane in cases and flew directly to California.
Wow.
On a commercial flight, the next commercial flight from Reagan National, I think it was, they took them to. Because I happened to be working the security detail that day. And they called and said, hey, you're there, you're working. I said, yeah. They said, do us a favor, go to the, such and such, I won't say it, but such and such office, our office, go to the safe, open it. 4 guys are going to show. Just help them do what they have to do. Because I was an instructor at the time. Help them do what they have to do. It's all legit. I'm like, okay, whatever. And I didn't have a clue. And then when they showed up, and the one guy, 2 of them actually, I knew really well. We were kind of buddies. We worked out together. We drank together once in a while. And when I saw him show up, I'm like, oh, this has got to be bad. If you're bringing this dude in, the shit's going to hit the fan. Because he's a shit magnet, but nothing happened. And she graduated from college, and she went on with her life. And I give her a little bit of a pass in the beginning. She was a kid. Now when I hear some of the shit she says, I just kind of roll my eyes. But anyway, so that was it. I ended up having to be the first Secret Service Uniform Division officer, first Secret Service employee to ever testify against the sitting president in a criminal investigation while I was still protecting. And like I said, it went to the Supreme Court. They gave me 72 hours to surrender. And I, we had to agree to it. And then I went on 2 weeks vacation. And then I came back. And because I had been working nonstop with all this testifying for months. And I was burnt out. So if you have time for one more story, I'll tell you that one more story.
I do. Go ahead.
So I'm in this meeting with so the law firm that I have representing me quietly, Mark Halbern's law firm, their chief constitutional expert, who I'm meeting with, who they're flying up from Atlanta once a week to meet a debrief me. His college roommate is Gary Grindler. Gary Grindler was Janet Reno's right-hand man.
I know who she is.
Yes, yeah. She was.
I'm from Nevada.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. So she was the attorney general.
Yeah.
And anyway, so when Mark's first representing me, and I'm still nervous, and I meet this constitutional expert for the first time, he's telling me about his relationship with Grindler, and he says, "Here's what I'm going to do, Gary. Have a seat. I'm going to call Grindler. You can listen to it on the speaker. It'll be a conference call. Please don't say a word. Just let me do what I do." And, I looked at Mark, and he's like, "We're good." And I said, "Okay." So I sat down, and I would tell you that more than once when I would go into this office and the Secret Service legal counsel's office, the women that ran the office more than once would look at me and said, "When is the last time you slept?" Or, "Have you eaten anything?" And I'd be like, "What?" I don't know. But I was burnt out, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, so he gets Gary Grinlow on the phone. He says, "Hey, I can't remember his name right now. That's so and so. Hey, you jerk! I heard you were in town. You're just calling me now." He goes, "Well, I'm calling you to let you take me out to dinner." And he's like, "I want to take your cheap ass out to dinner." So they're going back and forth. And he goes, after a couple of minutes, like friends are, he goes, "Hey, I'm calling about business." He goes, "What's up?" He goes, "My firm is going to represent one of these young men from the Secret Service Uniform Division." And he said, "I'm glad to hear that." He said, "Because some of these guys are going to be in the jam." He goes, "I don't know everything they know, but it's going to be bad. And the star investigation is not going to let up on these guys." And he said, they didn't say what my name was. He just said, "Yep. So I'll be, I may have to contact you about this if my guy and some of his." He goes, "I'm representing one guy," but he said, "But I'm going to be looking out for all of them," which all the lawyers involved did, because one of the senior agents that was subpoenaed, Larry. I can't believe I can't remember his last name. He was one of the, and he shouldn't have been subpoenaed. He wasn't on Bill Clinton's detail when all this shit happened. So anyway, Larry, the day that I had to go into the grand jury, as I was getting ready to, they were literally had to drag me in there. And again, I was about to throw up on them. And I was trying to delay. So anyway, the lawyer pulled me aside and said, "Mr. Byrne, I don't know you, but I think because I know Larry, I know the type of person you are. Do not fall on your sword. He is not worth it. Go in there, pull up your big boy pants, tell the truth. Do not fall on your sword. I beg of you. Don't ruin your life because of this guy." And, I burst into tears. I was like, finally, somebody,
Yeah.
And they didn't know I was being representative, and I couldn't say, "Hey, I'm sort of backstopped," but I was very emotional. I was so grateful, and they were so kind, and then they came and got me, and they, I'm kind of telling two stories at one time. So they tried to drag me into the grand jury. There's reporters. It's a dark hallway. I felt like I was in the middle of a John Grisham movie.
Oh yeah.
And there's a marshal who's got me by the hand, a U.S. Marshal. He's enormous, black man.
Is he afraid you're going to run away?
No. He's doing the right thing. He's trying to keep contact with me because they're trying to get to me.
Okay.
There's reporters in there. There's all these lawyers. And my lawyers are still beside me, and they're not supposed to be. And the last thing the Secret Service attorney says to me is, he said, "Don't forget what we rehearsed. Don't forget what we told you." And what it was no matter what the question was, wait as long as you possibly could. Repeat the question to them, and then ask to seek the advice of your attorney. I could leave the room. He could not come in, but I could request to consult with my attorney before I answered the question legally and go out of the room. And what we were trying to do is delay, because we were hoping to get a stay from the Supreme Court. This is before the case went to Rehnquist. This is just a couple of weeks before. And we're trying to get this stay because the Secret Service is trying to invent a privilege. They're trying to invent the protective function privilege, similar to the spousal privilege, because my wife and I share a pillow,
Right. Yeah.
And I tell her things. You can't force her to testify against me, right? So that's what they're, because of the proximity to a protectee to protect them, we should be exempt. I didn't believe in it. I didn't think it was constitutional. At the longest stretch, I didn't think it was constitutional. But if they wanted to play it, what did I care? Go,
Right.
go. So they're dragging me in there, and I have breakfast sitting right here. I'm going to vomit. And I stop, and the marshal stops, and I look at him and I go, "I am going to puke." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "I'm going to throw up. I need a bathroom." And the star investigator grabs my other hand and says, "No, we're too late for that." And I pulled out of his hand and I looked at the marshal and I said, "Marshal, I'm going to puke. I need a bathroom." And he pushed everybody away with his giant arm, and he took me to this door and he pulled a key out and he opened it up, and I walked in and I closed the door and the light came on, and I looked around and there was no toilet. There was a hole in the ground and a stainless steel fitting, and there was no mirror but a piece of stainless steel and a stainless steel sink. And I said, "Holy crap, I'm in a prisoner bathroom. I have slipped off of, I am done. I am in a prisoner's bathroom. I am screwed." So I looked around the room and I looked at my weird reflection in the stainless steel plate.
Yep.
And I heard a voice in my head say, "Pull your pants up, be a man, be legal, go forward." I washed my face. I threw up a little bit. I rinsed my mouth out. I walked out. I said, "Marshall, let's go." And we did. And I walked in there, and so the not Bill Clinton, Judge Starr's grand jury had been working nonstop. They were given some days off. So when this came to fruition, a grand jury is a grand jury. So they went and got a grand jury that was there for some financial crime and pulled them in. It's completely legal.
Wow.
And so as they're pulling them in, they don't know what they're coming in from that end of the room where I'm coming in from this end of the room. And again, people are pulling on me. And I don't do well with people touching me. And they've disarmed us, which we fought tooth and nail, but we had to give up our handguns, and because we felt like we were being set up, because they put us all in the same van. We're like, they're going to murder us right in the middle of Washington. There's 16 people that can, anyway. So this is happening. I got no gun. People are touching me. I got this giant marshal dragging me. And as I'm going into the room, there's a guy standing there with a Bible, and a woman puts my hand on the Bible. They start swearing me in. I'm still walking. And I look up and I see the people coming in, and I know it's the grand jury, and I don't know that it's not the regular grand jury at the time. And I look down after they swear me in. I look down, and there's a table, and there's a trash can. And I grab the trash can because I know I'm going to puke again. And I go and I sit in this little box, just like on TV, like Mayberry RFD, a little railing, and I sit in there. And they announced that this is a grand jury from something else, and because they have to say it legally because it's being recorded, I guess. And I look up, and all of a sudden I realized they were realizing who I am, because I've been all over, the Secret Service, and my picture and other people's have been all over. And I'm like, and I can see them saying to each other, "Holy shit, that's the Bill Clinton." And I'm going, "Holy shit, I'm screwed," So I'm already sworn in technically, and they sit down, and the clock is running. I think the time was supposed to be like 9:45. If they could ask me the question before 9:45 in the morning, I have to answer it. So I remember looking at my watch. I don't remember exactly what time it was. I remember I kept looking at it, and I couldn't remember. I couldn't see that. I just couldn't function.
You're right.
So somebody yells at me from the middle of the room, "Are you Gary J. Byrne?" And I nodded. And somebody said, "You have to verbally answer us. Identify yourself." And I said, "I'm Gary J. Byrne of the United States Secret Service Uniform Division." And as I was saying it, I kept sounding like, "Talk slower." Gary J. Byrne of the United States Secret Service Uniform Division. And they said, "Where are you assigned?" And I said, "I'm assigned at the United States Secret Service Training Center. I'm a firearms instructor." "Were you assigned outside the Oval Office on these days, blah, blah, blah?" "Yes, I was." "Were you on a post? Were you called the E6 officer?" "Yes, I was." And then, the guy said, "At any time during your experience in the Secret Service, did you ever see Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton alone together?" So that was the linchpin, right? Bill Clinton had signed an affidavit, and Monica Lewinsky, and they tried to get Linda Tripp to sign an affidavit because Big Mouth Monica had told Linda everything. Clinton and Lewinsky signed an affidavit saying not only did they never have an affair, they had never been alone together. So when people say how smart Bill Clinton is, I beg to differ. So Anyway, so they asked the question, and I am like, oh, this is not going to go well. So I wait. I mean, I don't know. I think I might have counted 9 or 10 seconds. And then I said, you're asking me if I ever saw Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky alone together. And I forget how they phrased it, but I repeated it exactly. And I sat there, and I was just getting ready to say, on the advice of my attorney, I request to speak to my attorney. I think that's what it was to say. They had a phrase we had to say. And I was just getting ready to say it. And I didn't know what time it was. And all of a sudden, the doors in the back of the room burst open, like in a movie. And this tall dude, young dude, yells, Gary Byrne. And he literally said, do not answer that fucking question.
Ooh.
And I jumped up and I said, yes, sir. and I looked around, and the grand jury was like, like this, and I'm like that. And I said, can I leave? And they said, yes. And I shot at that door like I was getting off the Hindenburg. And everybody was sitting out there, and I walked out, and I go, what was that?
Right. What just happened?
We got to stay. So that went on for a couple of weeks. And then Rehnquist said I had to go and testify. So I went on vacation. I got my shit together. I made arrangements for a place for my wife to hide with my child if it was necessary. I called an old friend who I had known years ago who had a very remote place in upstate Pennsylvania. And I said, are you watching TV? And do you know what's happening? He goes, yeah. I said, well, I may need to send my wife and child to you. I need you to fix this,
Right.
And he said he would. But it never happened. Everything went okay. And, I went on vacation. I came back. They took me to the grand jury, and I went in and answered all the questions. And it was a train wreck. I had talked so much, and I had answered so many questions that I couldn't remember. I couldn't stay inside the lines. And I literally came out, I was still allowed to come out of the questioning and ask to talk to my attorney. And at one point I was almost in tears, and I said, I can't focus. I can't think. I'm over my abilities. I can't do it. I said, and I had already threatened to quit once before, sort of in the middle of this when they were figuring out what was going on. There was Time Magazine tried to print a story that my job at the White House with an agent was to bring Bill Clinton's girlfriends in through a secured tunnel, and that we were basically pimps.
I remember actually, I think I read that article.
Yeah, they tried to print it, and it something similar to it got printed. But
yeah,
so that was one of the times when the Secret Service was the Secret Service. So when that happened in the beginning, now the director.
Actually, I think I didn't read the article. I think it was on a news channel.
Yeah, they tried. Right, they tried to. Well, I wasn't in that article, but the first article the Time tried to print was that it was me and this agent. They named the agent. We barely knew each other. None of it was true. And when they told us the story, I was very emotional, and I said, "Listen, my parents are alive." And I said, if that story comes out, I will come in and jam this commission book up your ass. And I will be doing Dateline tomorrow night. They've called me 4 times or whatever. I think I said 3. They had. Dateline was calling me. They wanted me to come on the show. And I said, I will shove this commission book up your ass, resign, and I will go on Dateline, and I will burn everybody. I will burn you, the Secret Service, the director, the deputy directors that are all having affairs with staff members of the Clintons. I will burn you all to the ground. And they were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on now. Don't, I'm like, no, I'm done. I'm done. I got up, threw my ID at him, walked out, went into the bathroom, calmed down, came back. About an hour later, the head of the legal counsel came in and said, Gary, we're going to go down to the director's office. You can shake his hand and say hi to him. Don't say anything else to him. Now, the director of the Secret Service and I are friends because when I first came on, we were friends. When I first came on, he was in charge of training. And I didn't know who he was. And when I would stay after training to work out more, I end up running with this guy, and
right. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned him.
And, right. And we're in gym club. And then finally one day I said, I just called him Lou. I said, what's your name? He said, Lou. I said, okay, Lou. So then like one day, I don't know, something happened. And I said, I saw him later on I saw him during the day. And I'm like, huh, how are you, sir? He goes, Gary, how are you? I go, you didn't say you were the head of training. He goes, you didn't ask. And I go, have I done something wrong? He goes, absolutely not. He goes, don't hurt my feelings by not working out with me. I said, oh, okay. And so we were, when he was in charge of Bill Clinton's detail, I was his go-to guy, Anyway, now he's director, right? All this crap's happening. And one of the things that became clear is Lou and these other senior agents didn't want us to testify, but if anybody was going to have to testify, they wanted us to because they didn't want to ruin their lives.
Right.
They knew the same information we did, most of it.
Yeah.
But they were pushing us forward in a way. And I understood that. And, I want to sit here and tell you I would have never done that, but I wasn't in that position. I was on the shit end. So I go into we go into the office. I shake his hand and he grabs my hand and he just said, oh, I'm so sorry. And I said, it's okay. Let's do it, So I don't know why I'm there, but so we sit down at a conference table and the lawyer explains that he says, we have an appointment with Time Magazine, their editor, the person that owns the magazine, and the writer. And just listen to what Lou has to say. Now, the lawyer has already asked me all the questions. I've made it very clear it's all bullshit. I have proved it to him because of stuff that's in the story. Like, look at this date. Here's my calendar book. I wasn't even here. Or this or that. Or,
right.
And so, and I also said to him, ask the director or ask, and I named another agent. I won't say it now. He's, it's not necessary, but I named another senior agent that was good friends with the director. I said, ask either one of them if this is true. They know the other shit that I did. They know I did do this was not what I did.
Right.
I was their guy when they went on a detail to Chicago and Bill Clinton was going to be in a hotel for 3 days. They asked for me and my partner from the West Wing because we knew every staff member on site. I was their go-to guy. They put me in the motorcade with a handheld metal detector in case Bill Clinton wanted to get out and shake hands with the public and I could screen them as they were, I was their guy, man. Until I wrote these books, I was their dude. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. So anyway, they get the Time Magazine on the phone and the lawyer for the Secret Service says, we have talked to Mr. Byrne and another employee. None of this is true. They say it's completely fictional. And they've given us proof to prove that point on dates and stuff and this and that. And the writer says, well, I might have a couple things wrong, but I know it's 100% factual or whatever. And so I don't know, like the lawyers talk back and forth for a minute. And then finally, Marletti, I don't know if he did something with his finger or something. And the lawyer says, Director Marletti would like to say something. And he stands up and he leans across the table. He's a pretty small dude, but he's very athletic. This guy had been a Green Beret in Vietnam. So
wow.
Everything you need to know about him. And he says, I personally know some of these people you're accusing. I've known them since they came on the job. And he said, and if you disparage their reputation with this lie, he said, I promise you, Time Magazine and any subsidiary will never set foot on another Secret Service piece of property. We will never give you access to anything. And he said, I will do everything in my power and persuade Bill Clinton to never let you on the complex again. You cannot destroy these people's lives for a sensational story that you missed out on. and he went on to something else. And then they muted it, and like 5 minutes went by, and then they came back on and said, under the circumstances, we will not be printing the story now. We will continue to verify that we believe it's 100% true, and we'll continue to verify it. And that was it, and it went away. Now, it might have been part of it might have been reprinted by somebody else, and I did remember seeing something, but it didn't name any of us, and it was
it didn't. It just said Secret Service in just in context.
So I had to say this in public, during the testimony. Listen, I'm not Bill Clinton's conscience, and we weren't hired. None of us were hired to be his nanny. We're hired to catch a bullet or keep him from doing something stupid and getting hurt, or to protect him. Yes, I did things like I hid those towels. I destroyed those towels because the guys that were going to wash them were the young Navy seamen, sailors down there. They knew what semen was. There was enough rumors flying around about what was going on up there, and I was trying to squash that. Right. And some of the other things that happened, and so eventually life kind of went on. I mean, I was sort of persona non grata. I kept my job at the training section. I loved it. I was teaching agents and officers, new agents and officers, how to be gunfighters, and I loved it. Yeah. And this higher ups made it very clear that they hated me. I mean, not Marletti so much. He left not too long after that, and but there was a group of senior agents that went out of their way to shit on me, and that was fine. And then 9/11 happened, which was a disaster. But for years, when we complained about the way we were treated before this Lewinsky shit and Bill Clinton, about the way they worked us and treated us. At one time, it came to a head, and the director looked at a bunch of us. The director at the time was a guy named Brian Stafford. And I say his name, but I also say, listen, he wasn't a complete zero. He was a good agent, but he definitely had a bug up his ass about the uniform division. But when he needed us, he trusted us. We worked okay. He was good to us when we worked. But he, in a meeting one time, an all-hands meeting, we were complaining about the work conditions and working us to death. And he finally got pissed off and said, this job isn't for everybody. Maybe this isn't the place for you. And at the time, a lot of people had nowhere else to go. Like, I wasn't college educated. I struggled with, like I said, with learning. Where was I going to go? You could keep shitting on me forever. Then 9/11 happens, and they stand up the new air marshal program. And most of the managers are coming from the old Secret Service, retired people. But, and this is the analogy. One of my friends said, you're jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. And this is the analogy I used. I go, look, a shit sandwich is a shit sandwich. For $20,000 more a year, it digests better. And that's what it was. I retired. If I'd stayed an officer in the uniform division, the most I could have possibly made, my retirement is the same as a uniform division inspector, because I transferred to the air marshals, and the pay was higher, and the pay grade was higher. I worked, I flew all the time. I was gone 200 days a year, but I actually had a better lifestyle. When I wanted leave, I could get it.
Right.
Vacation, I wasn't forced to work my days off all the time. Now, there were exceptions to that. When there was a higher security risk, we're cops, we're air marshals, just like in the Secret Service. When there was a threat, we ran to it. If they came to us and said, hey, Israel says they're not going to let a commercial flight leave unless there's two of you on there. I'm going,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the way we are. Men, women, people in the law enforcement, the military, that's what you signed me up to do. Let's run at them. And
let's do it.
But it was a better lifestyle. It was exhausting. It was better money. I retired after 13 years, 29 years total. I wrote the books, kept my pension. Nobody's run me over from Arkansas yet. And the first book made me a New York Times best-selling author before it was actually released.
And again, you guys can catch that one out there on Amazon.
Yeah.
And then the second book, that would be Secrets of the Secret Service.
Correct.
And that one is hatchetbookgroup.com.
Yep.
So we are going to wrap it up. I do know, so a couple quick things. And if you could kind of a quick answer to that, Jim has a couple questions. And so if you could just give a quick snippet. First one was, what happened when Bill was using the cerebral palsy crutches when supposedly it was because of something that happened at 3 a.m. in the morning? It was a crazy excuse. I remember, like golf or something.
It was true, actually. Yeah, it was actually true.
It was golf.
Yeah, it was golf. He was down in Florida. He was staying with the Shark. His nickname is the Shark. He was an Australian golfer. I can't remember his name.
Oh, I don't remember either.
He was staying at his house, and he did have an accident. It wasn't, and it didn't involve a brass pole, you know. So
there you go, Jim. The second question, he says, could you possibly ask Dan Bongino to be a guest on here? Just saying.
Yeah. So I'm not in contact with him all the time.
Right. And you know, Dan's got his own show.
He does. And he's very busy. And
he is.
So, but I will tell you that if you figure out how to get him on there, it'll be worth your while. He's very entertaining and he's a good human.
He is very entertaining. And he's super passionate about what he does.
And that's the way he was in the Secret Service. I'm telling you, he had 5 years on the job when they let him revamp the way we defended ourselves, the skills that we used, the stuff that we were doing. It was 25 years old what we were using. He had a jiu-jitsu background. Him and another guy. They let them redo the whole thing. And I was bent out of shape at first. Not that I had any place to be, because I knew the guy that did it 25 years ago, and he was a great dude. But Dan was 100% right, and it was good stuff. And he knows, he's a passionate guy, and he gets it done. I do like him.
I think that's awesome.
I also wanted to mention that I have a YouTube channel. I don't do much with it anymore, but you can find me on YouTube. I'm official Gary J. Byrne website, and everything that I've ever done, interviews and the testimonies, they're on my website. And there's some funny videos on there that I made in the beginning.
And that's Gary J. Byrne
official Gary J. Byrne for the website. The videos are on YouTube.
All right, let's see here. Official Gary J. Byrne.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's post, and that's for YouTube, right?
Well, no, that's just for the website.
Okay, YouTube, so www.
Yeah. If you just put YouTube, if you just go in YouTube, put my name in there, it'll pull up my stuff.
Okay, let's see.
Click on one of the.
I was typing it into the comments, but let's go. Oh, it's because I'm spelling it wrong.
Byrne.
Hello.
Should be one of my videos, and then if you just click on the thing, I'll take you right to the one. If you do Gary Byrne Secret Service, it'll pull it up too.
There it is. Okay, let me copy that. Okay, so I'm going to put this out in the comments, and so that should be out there for y'all. And also just some additional information, please, 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 if you haven't already, go out there, everybody, hit that like, subscribe, share with your friends, family, and we want to continue to support our veterans as much as possible. And Gary, thank you very, very much for coming on and telling your story, talking about your time in the military, your time in the Secret Service, Boeing, everything that you've talked about. And again, everybody, you can go out and take a look and purchase Gary's books. I'm excited to read them, especially having that face-to-face conversation, because it just gives a lot more context in my mind. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And let's see. Yes. And so Jim says, of course, he's going to go check out both books as well.
Thank you.
So really happy for that. So, okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead, I think, and we're going to wrap it up. And again, please, thank you. Please know I'm very honored and humbled to have you on the channel.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
So thank you for that. And if you want to hang tight for me for just a minute,
Sure.
we'll go ahead and get this wrapped up. Everybody, thank you very much for showing up tonight. And again, we will see you next Sunday.